Hello and welcome to another Slow Chat. I'm Topher. And you'll notice things look a little bit different on set this week. I've redecorated the set. And the biggest thing that you'll notice is there's someone else in it. This is Therese O'Neill. She's my guest tonight. And because she's local and she's actually a family friend and has been a friend and a business partner of my wife and a mentor for 9 years, if my memory serves me correctly.
I think that's about right, Topher. Coming up in a decade.
I happen to know that she shares a vice of mine in common. So this week's delicacy is a Oliva di Milanio. Yes, those of you that follow me religiously will know that I've had these on Slow Chats previously, but they are a beautiful stick, and they're a stick that, Therese, you're not a particularly regular cigar smoker. So I knew that this was going to be a cigar that you'd be able to enjoy, wasn't going to be overpowering. And this, by the way, won Cigar of the Year in 2014. So we're having a bit of a treat tonight. What are you paired with there? You've got a glass of... That was the Old Vine Barossa.
Filcel.
Right.
Yeah. It's the Filcel.
I don't remember either.
I can't remember either. Yep. It's a Cab Merlot.
I decanted it. No, that's the Shiraz. The Cab Merlot was the other one. Yeah, that's the Shiraz. Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, we're doing a great job tonight. I think I'm going to pair actually with some Glenlivet 15 because I'm a Scotch guy and the lovely French oak aging, 15 years of aging in French oak barrels of this particular Glenlivet goes very nicely with this cigar. Excuse me while I wrestle with my wrapper. So you might be wondering, why do I have this random person by the name of Therese on a Slow Chat? Normally there are federal politicians, maybe senior public servants, people with public profile, people who run political parties, these sorts of things. Well, I kind of felt like it was time to get really human and really real because we're heading into Christmas, and this Christmas is going to be different for a lot of us from normal. And it's going to be different because our relationships with people are different. People are treating us differently now. And we are having to treat other people differently now and navigating this weird feeling of being different. That's not something you'd be familiar with, is it?
Oh, not at all.
Therese? No, you've
standing out.
No, you've never been different. You've never been different in your life. So the whole purpose of Therese being here is simply because she's not that public figure. She's lived a life. I mean, actually, within your industry, you are a public figure, to be fair. But outside of your industry, you know,
totally unknowable.
Yeah,
totally unknowable.
Outside of the industry. But that makes your journey, I think, that much more relevant and that much more useful. So I want to kick off by lighting these cigars because they're going to be absolutely beautiful.
I'm going to get you to
do the honors on yours.
You need to do these.
Not a problem.
What I also want to say about the cigars, if I can just interject for a moment, is as a lady that smokes cigars and have for a very, very long time. And the tradition started, so I'm Irish, sort of Catholic heritage, and at somebody's funeral or wake, you'd always have the cigar. But this is it's an elegant one because it's not too chubby and chunky for a lady. Yeah. So it should be nice.
So this is what's called box press, where it's actually got, if I can point it correctly, it's actually got quite a square shape to it. It's not actually round. And that just allows it to kind of sit in your fingers and just hold its orientation quite well. And just kind of, it just fits quite nicely. Anyway, let me just trim that for you. So I think it's fair to say, Therese, you're someone who's very comfortable with being different.
Not always so.
Okay, so this is what I want to get into. I want to start with, was that a journey for you to get to the point where you are, or have you always been comparatively comfortable being different compared to most others?
Okay, so I suppose comparatively, sort of, yes. I think that is my mother has got flair.
Right.
Yes. My daughter's got flair. So I think there's a little bit in the DNA, which is like a little bit of flair. And that's got an awful lot to do with color.
Which I love to tease Therese. And I say, Therese, clearly you're not a lesbian, but your girlfriend is. Right? You know, and she's not happily married, happily partnered, kids, all the rest of it. But you've definitely got a sense of style about you. And you're not afraid to flaunt that. But it goes a lot deeper than that. Just take a couple of draws on that. While you're thinking about that and making sure that that's properly lit, we just need to make sure the heat gets all the way through there. One of the things that you need to know about Therese is that she's very self-depreciating compared to what she could be. And so numerous times tonight, she's going to disagree with me and say, oh, no, I'm not that at all. Take my word for it that she is, rather than her humble, attempt at self-depreciation. Therese is relatively fearless, someone who has tried an enormous number of things. So you feel the fear, but you do it anyway.
The man in the arena, right?
It is very, and I posted that, I think, to my Facebook page only a little while ago. I don't think you knew that.
Oh no, I haven't. Yeah.
So it's you are willing to be the person out there giving it a go, and if that means you fall flat on your face and you fail, then that's just what the journey that you're going to have to go through to find a way to pick yourself back up again. What does it take for someone like yourself to become very comfortable to the point that, let me explain what I mean, because people don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
You are aware that not everybody likes your particular brand of human being. Not everybody likes the way you come across.
They don't. And that's okay, because you can just unfollow me. Mm-hmm. And you can do that in like the real life virtual world, like in the real life world as well. You can steer clear of me at an industry event. Mm-hmm. You can roll your eyes and be irritated, but I don't think I'm trying to do anybody any harm.
No. Now, what about family, though? Do you have family that try and maybe minimize their interactions with you as well?
That's a deep question, Topher.
Sorry, but the cigar's lit. We're into the night.
We are into the night. Look, I can be really annoying. Yeah, I know. I'm really aware of that, and I know the world is full of different sort of people and personality types, and I know that some people just can only tolerate me in small doses, and it's not that they hate me. Yeah. So, but that can make you feel, a little dejected sometimes.
Yeah, it takes some processing.
I think I bring some fun to things.
Well, see, I grew up. My dad was very much a people pleaser. He was a pastor of a Christian church, and had this idea that I think came from his parents, that it was possible to be friends with everybody. It was possible to be liked by everybody. And so what he would instinctively do when someone didn't like him for whatever reason, and I mean, when you're a pastor of a church and it's your job to counsel people and so forth, people are going to find reasons to hate your guts. That's just how it goes. But when that would happen, he would so often be bending over backwards to try and figure out, how do I make this person like me? Because underneath everything, he had this belief that was possible, that you could be liked by everybody.
Yeah, okay. Right? Then there's another dysfunctional way of dealing with that too, which is, if not everybody loves me, then there's something about me that's deficient or wrong. Yeah. So then you can beat yourself up. Then you can't please. What is it that saying?
Oh, you
all of the
you can please some of the people all the time. You can't please all. Yeah.
So if you just make peace with that,
some of the people, some of the time, you can't please all the people all the time.
And you and I, and we would all meet people that, and there's just nothing attractive about them, just as a personal thing, right?
Yeah.
There's just no connection. That's okay. But I don't need to whinge about them
No.
But denigrate them in any way. That doesn't serve any purpose. We just don't have personalities, values, or anything that match.
I talk about relationship triage. If you're a combat medic in the front lines of a war, and your job might be, as these helicopters are landing and Humvees are pulling up with wounded, is to divide them into three categories. There are the people that are beyond saving. It doesn't matter how much resources you put into them, you can't save their life. There are the people that don't need help. They're not going to die, right? They don't need help. But then there are the people in the middle, where they're going to die if they don't get help. But if you pour resources into them, then you could save them. You could, And one of the things that I kind of realized about what my dad was doing was he was trying to pour all of his emotional resources and his relational resources into the people that couldn't be saved. The people that hated his guts, that were never going to like him no matter what he did, no matter what he said to them. All of his energy was going into people where it was just a bottomless pit of energy. And
when did you become aware of that, do you think?
A really bitter experience, actually. I hadn't made that connection, but okay. So you know how humans can be real assholes sometimes.
No.
I know. Bombshell, right? Bombshell.
Surprise. I can be an asshole too sometimes.
Yes. No. So unfortunately, even in churches, the problem with churches is they have people in them. It's a real problem. It's a real limitation. You know, churches are perfect right up until you put people in them. It's this really unfortunate thing. So I had a particularly bitter experience where my dad had pastored a church for 9 years, and an assistant pastor came in and, unbeknownst to us, began spreading really vicious rumors about my dad and so forth, and really kind of turning people against him, but in private. And so we didn't sort of realize what was happening. So
it's insidious.
Very much so. And then ultimately it all came to a head at an annual general meeting where I was there as I would have been no more than 11 years old, I think. And I was there in this meeting that was incredibly boring normally. But this time I'm watching people stand up and say things about my dad that I knew were not true. And there was one particularly significant example that sticks with me. It was the youth pastor who pastored the youth group that I was in, who I went to this youth group every week. And this guy stands up and he says of my dad things that I knew were not true and that I knew that he knew were not true.
As in he, the teller.
The teller knew that what he was saying was not true.
And he knew you were there?
Well, yeah. No, he didn't care that I was there. I was an irrelevance in the room. This is a room of a couple of hundred members of this particular church. And he stands up there and he says this, and he's got standing in the church. And so a lot of people believe him. And I sat there and my world kind of broke a little bit in that moment, because for the first time I saw that people actually couldn't be trusted. Yeah. And he was right. No, he wasn't my dad, but he was right up there.
Yeah. Right? So you knew him at an esteemed level.
Yeah. Correct. And I
watched, and in an 11-year-old mind, the more, the higher up you are, the more esteemed you are.
Correct. And I thought he was a friend, and I played with his kids. He lived just up the street from me. Like, it was unimaginable that someone like that would just flat out lie. And yet I'd seen it and heard it, and it was there in front of me. And that was a moment that really fractured my ability to agree with my dad's worldview. And I think that whole experience, which played out over a period of a year, that whole experience obviously affected my dad deeply, because he had done everything as rightly and as righteously as he possibly could, and yet was just absolutely piled on. And then once he was thrown out of the church, there was almost immediate regret, and people were asking him to come back or asking him to start a new church. And a lot of people, once they got what they thought they wanted, they'd been jazzed up into this almost a lynch mob at one point, and he was thrown out of the church. And then a lot of people kind of the fog cleared, and they went, "Oh, hang on, what have we done?" And life moved on. We never went back to that particular church, but for me, I think that was the moment where for my dad, he began to realize, actually, there are some people whose opinion of you is not based on reason.
Correct.
It isn't actually based on anything intelligent. It is based on a whole host of other factors, many of which you're not in control of. And I think that was, for him, the beginning of the journey away from believing that you could please everybody. And for me, that was the beginning. That was probably the first of a number of events that I've had over the years that have led me to the point now where I have enemies. Good. There are people that hate my guts, and they always will. Okay.
Yes.
And that was not the way I was raised. It's not what my dad raised me to be, or the attitude that my dad raised me to have. But I learned it over time.
It still hurts, right? I think I'm at peace with having people that don't like me too. So I think I am at peace with that. But it's a process that I've had to learn because it hurts.
Yeah. It does hurt. And so when I started political commentary, I'm just going to answer this one.
Yes.
I actually don't know what happened. I heard that it was on. I wasn't able to go there, and I don't actually know what happened with the Freedom Ball. So it was up in Sydney. Grab that.
Thank you.
Just knock the ash off first. Here we go. Let's do this properly. So you use that. Knock all the ash off, just onto the ground is fine.
Oh, okay.
That's what brooms were invented for. So you don't relight when there's ash on there. So the Freedom Ball happened. I believe the police tried to stop it. And I don't know what the fallout from that was. I'm sorry. I've been buried in the documentary and other things, and I haven't really been keeping up. Ethan, exactly. This is the Winston Churchill quote. You have enemies, good. That means you stood up for something in your life. I had this epiphany not long after I started being Topher, and I won't retell the story, but I kind of fell into it. It wasn't a plan. I didn't plan any of this shit. It's not what I ever sort of woke up one day and wanted, but hey, here I am. So I did a video on Qantas, and the international pilots threatening to strike and industrial action over Qantas and so forth. This is one of my lesser known videos.
So where circa when?
9, maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, probably more 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely 10 years ago. Actually, I was 29 and I made this video. And naturally, of course, all of the pilots' union trolls all come out and attack and do what they do. But I discovered, in amongst all of the vitriol, a few really valid criticisms.
Yes.
Of things that I hadn't paid enough attention to in the video. Mm-hmm. One of which was actually a genuine challenge to the conclusions that I'd drawn. Like, it's like, okay, if I actually follow this through to its logical conclusion, and if this information proves to be correct, then the conclusion that I've actually drawn and presented in that video may not be correct.
Or accurate.
Yeah, well, yeah, it might, not as accurate as it needs to be, or certainly not as nuanced as it needs to be. There was another level of nuance that I potentially, I didn't know at this moment in time, but I potentially needed to have actually addressed a deeper nuance. And I was surprised to discover within myself, because I wouldn't have thought of myself as being thick-skinned at that point in time, but I was surprised to discover how little I cared about the vitriol.
Yeah, okay.
And how much I cared about the fact that I might have made a mistake. And it was just this really interesting moment where laid out in front of me was this sort of social commentary on me, as delivered by a bunch of people that hated my guts, as delivered by these people that thought I was now the devil. But there was all of a sudden this piece of social commentary on me, and just sitting there going, I'm less bothered by the vitriol than what I thought I would be, but I'm really freaking bothered by the fact that I might have got this wrong. And so I actually put up I didn't pull the video, but I actually put up a over-screen graphic saying, I'm now questioning whether this is correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I changed the text under the video to say, look, I'm now reassessing whether this is correct. In the end, I removed those and reinstated the video back to what it was, because upon further investigation, I felt that the conclusion that I had drawn did accurately reflect the reality. Yeah. And if I was going to go that next layer deeper, actually there were arguments and counter arguments, and that was a much bigger project and a much bigger video. For the sake of the time that I had and the video that I did, it was accurate insofar as it needed to be. So I ended up removing all of those on there. But it's been a really interesting journey and a really interesting process of figuring out who I am to get to the point where I no longer really care about people's criticisms, because I definitely used to. But also discerning, and this is where I feel like you would have quite a lot to say, is when is criticism valid and when is it not? And how do you, as the receiver of feedback, criticism, people ignoring you, people avoiding you, what have you, when do you just go, oh, well, that person's whatever, who cares? And when do you go, hang on, that might actually be reflecting something about me that I should pay attention to?
Well, yes. And okay. I think I'm a lot more patient these days. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Because sometimes what we tend to do, yes, is we have a group of people that we surround ourselves with who are people that are like or complementary to who we are as people. Right. So they are people that reinforce and what it is that we do. So we get validation and we get uplift from those people. And then you've got critics that are outside of that. Yeah. And it's very easy because you get hurt. Yeah. Because I'm human, you're human. Yeah. You get hurt when you see those comments. I think you need to take the emotion out of it. So oftentimes people will make some hysterical comment, or will propagate some gossip that is not found. You. Like, I think if you have a very good understanding of you, and let's try and understand the emotion that goes behind it, I would tend to disregard nasty comments. Yeah. Because I don't think that serves anyone well. You've got to always bear in mind the lesson that you've learned, right? Because sometimes you may not like the person, you may not like the way that they delivered the message, but sometimes you should maybe reflect and go, what if they're right? But what if they're right? What if I'm the asshole here? Yeah. So because I don't think any of us by nature like to think of ourselves as being something like that. But maybe something that I have done, maybe my behavior, the way I deliver something is proving to be offensive for a lot of people. So maybe I should reflect on that. Give me time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will decide one way or the other. Yes, probably I could tone it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever. Or sometimes just you could unfollow me.
That's
a reasonable thing to do. Don't light the fire. Okay. Don't add. Just it's okay.
So I found out recently that someone with whom, let's say, the relationship is strained, but they are in a position within my life that unfollowing them in real life is not an option. I found out recently that they felt an obligation because there's a certain relationship there that they had to follow my Topher page and read all my stuff. And so they were continuously in this state of anger and angst at me because they're like, you're so wrong about all these things, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Turns out they'd been bathing in all my content.
If it irritates you, I just unfollow.
Unsubscribe, unfollow. But sometimes you can't do that in real life. And obviously the context for this conversation is a Christmas coming now where some families have been divided by pro-mandate, anti-mandate, people calling each other names, people saying, oh, if you're pro-choice, then actually you're anti-vax and you're ignorant and you're this and you're that. And there's all this angst now has been introduced into family environments for a lot of people for the first time, not for everybody by any stretch of the imagination, but in a way that many people haven't experienced it before. And navigating that can be challenging. Now, can I out you here as you're not an anti-vaxxer?
I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I don't have an issue.
I'm deeply disappointed. Neither am I. For the record, for those that don't know me, neither am I.
Yeah. Everybody's got a right to their own decision, and I'm not going to judge. If I've had a friendship with you for years and years, something as trite as that is not going to divide my feelings. But I see it playing out, Topher. And there's some quite vitriolic commentary, so much where everybody's very much polarized one side or the other. There doesn't seem to be a lot of tolerance.
Well, see,
and that's disappointing.
There are a lot of people in the middle ground, but the people at either end don't want to believe there's people in the middle ground. And so if you're not at their end, they just assume that you're all the way at the other. And this is where we get the, one side screaming Nazi at the other side and the other side screaming communist at the other side, and there's no room for any nuance in the middle. This isn't about those who believe in science and those who are anti-vaccine or anti-vaxxers. This is actually, there's an awful lot of people who have had a lot of vaccines, myself included. And in my case, I've chosen not to have any of the mRNA vaccines. Okay, that's been my choice up to this point in time. And I plan to continue that choice for the foreseeable future because the data to me, as I read it, doesn't justify me getting that vaccine. Certainly not giving it to my kids, one of whom is now 5 years old and is old enough if this adjustment comes through and they're saying, right, 5 to 12-year-olds have to have it. I'm not really comfortable with that, right? Now, I've been jabbed with everything under the sun. When I was in the Army Reserve, you have to be up to date with everything, right? They jabbed you so many times you felt like a pincushion. It was ridiculous. But that was just what you had to do if you wanted to be, if you wanted to be in there. So, people call me anti-vaxxer, and I just sit there and go, what is it about this issue that you feel you can't allow middle ground? You can't allow someone to actually be anything other than extremely opposed to you. It's almost like they need to believe that that's the case, if that makes sense. It somehow psychologically helps them if they can just push everybody else to the other side.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I do reflect back on just a bit of that staged, back when they did those lab tests on people in the early days of psychology with the green eye, blue eye thing.
Yes.
So they manufactured an environment that people were very easily coerced into over time in those bubbles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
In those bubbles. Yep. And I suppose that's what we need to be careful of.
Yep. The Milgram experiments.
Yeah. Is just in life about putting ourselves out there and getting outside our comfort zone and meeting people that are not necessarily within our bubble.
Yeah. Now, this is a great comment from James. This is spot on. mRNA vaccines, lots of potential, very exciting. You first. That's. I could not have put that better. That's exactly like, hey, what if we have discovered a faster, cheaper, and better way to make vaccines? How exciting is that? But you know what? We're not actually going to know what the long-term results are until there's been a little bit of long-term go by, right? Now, for some people, they're happy to take that risk. Some people are early adopters, but people like myself, well, we're not. So,
and that doesn't mean that we can't be friends.
Doesn't mean so. You've outed yourself that you've made a different decision to me.
Yes.
And it turns out we can still sit next to each other and have a cigar. Although I do notice that yours has gone out
again.
You're not smoking enough. You've got to smoke that little bit more.
I'm having the wine now. Nice.
So tell me a little bit about your own journey as regarding your decision to go out into business on your own, because that's a pretty courageous decision. And without wanting to suggest that you're in any way aged or well matured or anything like that, it was an even bigger decision when you made it than it would be for someone making it now. And especially the industry that you moved into, I would suggest, was a pretty male-dominated, misogynistic. And I don't use that word. I don't throw that word around lightly, right? I don't just label everything misogynist. No. It was a misogynistic industry. So what were you doing before you struck out on your own? And why did you decide to strike out on your own?
Always in the very glamorous world of banking and finance, Topher. Couple of things to set the scene. So when I first started in the industry, I was not paid superannuation because I was a girl. No. So that was something
you are aging yourself now.
I am aging myself now. Yeah. But I genuinely actually just love the finance game.
Okay.
But it has been even today, Topher, where there's been leaps and bounds in representation, say, of women on boards and women in senior executive positions over the last 10 years in the ASX top 200 companies or top 100 companies.
Yep.
In the banking and finance industry, not so much.
Yeah.
So it's still very, very male dominated. And some women that are doing some amazing things, including your lovely wife.
Yes, indeed.
Who are, you know what, which is what I love working with, cool modern women, a generation below me, that are now building businesses on their own terms. So by design.
Yeah.
Going, I want this sort of lifestyle. How can I enable that to happen?
There's a really interesting thing that I reflect on from time to time. That if my wife and my politics were different, but our lifestyle was precisely the same,
yes,
we would be poster children for the modern feminist family.
You would be. Which
is so absurd because neither of us consider ourselves to be feminists. I don't even know if you do, consider yourself to be a feminist.
No, I don't. Yeah. I have an 18-year-old daughter who very much identifies as a feminist. Yeah, don't get on the wrong side of 18-year-old Sally Bales when she enters the workforce, I can tell you.
But speaking, like my wife, Edwina, she started her business because she wanted to be in charge of her own lifestyle. Yes. That was literally lifestyle design. That was her choice. She got into mortgage broking. She's good at it. She's good with her numbers. She's fantastic with customer service.
And she has a passion for...
She loves it. And she always finds it achieves, the best for her clients. So she started winning awards. The loyalty from her clients was off the charts, etc. We got married only about a year and a half after she started the business. And mortgage broking is a slow burn. It's a slow growth. When you start, it's not rolling in cash overnight or anything like that. So I took a job. For the first 3 years, I'd been freelancing in film before we got married. I took a job for the first 3 years that we were married in order to pay the bills. And by then, my wife's mortgage broking business had grown to the point that we could survive off that. So our first child came along, Winston, who many of you will have seen in other slow chats. He came along and one of us had to be the stay-at-home parent. And I was a bit over the producing TV commercials and all that sort of stuff that I was doing. And I had this passion, this idea for this go-karting center that is now getting very close to finally coming under construction. Hopefully next month that will commence construction, 5.5 years later. And so we made the decision and we sat down and we talked and we sort of said, well, hang on, you love what you do. Edwina loves what she does, is making enough money. We can get by, like not lavish. We can only have one car and we live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Etc. It was nothing lavish, but we can get by on that. And I'm perfectly fine with being a stay-at-home dad, looking after the kids and then pursuing this passion project, the go-karting, which wasn't going to pay the bills for at least a few years. It was going to be at least a few years before that was ever going to pay us back anything. And so we just looked at each other and went, well, this is the glove that fits. This is what works for us right now. Neither of us had any ego attached to it. Neither of us had any preconceived notions of what we needed to do or had to do or should do, allowed our families to dictate what expectations to us. We just looked at each other and said, what should we do? What's best for us? And that was the conclusion we came to. And the absurdity, as I reflect on it, of me most definitely not being a feminist, my wife most definitely not being a feminist, living what would actually, we would be poster children for a perfect little feminist couple with a stay-at-home dad looking after 2 kids while the wife runs her own business and wins awards and all that sort of stuff. If only our politics were a little bit different. But I'm persona non grata, so of course that will never happen. Tell me about the evolution of Therese from your entry into the workforce and back in a very different time when you were treated very differently. And my understanding is that as an industry could be an incredibly sort of not sexual assault, but sexual harassment and that sort of stuff back in that day. And still is in certain pockets now, although gradually that is being dealt with. How did you learn and grow, and how did you deal with some of the conflicts that inevitably would arise under those circumstances?
Yes, and they were, and I think it would be quite frightful. And when I think about the behaviours that that I put up with at the time, and some classic examples, which I find amusing today. I probably shouldn't, but there was one, and I was in corporate finance. I'm the only woman there. I'm an analyst. And we all went out, big boozy lunches as you do in the 80s.
Yes.
Your clients were property developers, and I'm talking, this is the Brisbane property market. So those white shoe sort of property development people. And so you had to be very balls and all. So, and I would go to these lunches, and they would go to a strip club afterwards, which would not happen today.
Yeah, couldn't.
And invite you along. It's like,
really?
I'll be fine. I'll go back to the office. You just run ahead. Yeah. Or members of men's only clubs. Yeah. Not strip clubs or anything like that. But just where only businessmen met.
Yeah.
Many of those back in the day.
Well, there are a few of those around still.
Not many, but I would think that the people that would frequent them today would be on the other side of 55. 80, yeah. I don't think that that's where you want to hang if you're a 28-year-old corporate banker today.
I don't know.
I think you want to hang where the cool people hang.
Depends on how big the deals are. If the deals are big enough. So how do you handle then that kind of, obviously you can't go to HR back then. They don't care. That's normal. There's no...
Correct.
You can't go anywhere up the chain and get any sympathy from anyone. So how do you survive in that world?
Yeah, that's an interesting. You know what I did? I studied and kept investing in my education, thinking that would be the answer. Yeah, right. Topher. And that's okay. So I invested a good decade in doing that, in upskilling myself. So, and I did feel so I got my fulfillment, and my sense of personal satisfaction from that investment in education. Yeah. And what it did, I built around me a cohort of people that were not from this horrible, horrible industry that I was in, but a cohort of people that were in astrophysics or in emergency services, or they were in mining. Yeah. Because as a cohort, we would work on different projects to solve problems. In my master's degree, with a cohort of people from different industries. They were uplifting and positive, and I was achieving great outcomes through that. So I found another outlet, I suppose. Topher.
It's an interesting thing. People, I was homeschooled, and I'm homeschooling my kids, and people sort of say, "Oh, but what about the social aspects of it? What about, blah, blah, blah." And I say, listen, homeschooling can be done well, and it can be done really badly. And the difference is very, very simple. Done well, you raise a child in a big world. Yeah. Done badly, you raise them in a small world.
In an insular world. Yeah. It goes back to the bubble. Yeah.
And what's really interesting about what you did, perhaps without realizing what you were doing at the time, was despite the fact that the whole culture wanted to keep you in a small world, you're just the analyst. There's a glass ceiling. Don't get too big for your boots, etc. You said, I'm going to go and find a way to give myself a big world.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
You know, you found those people that could broaden your horizons and actually enable you to live in a much bigger world than the place that was made for you as a woman in the world of finance.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
I don't have anything deeper than that to say, but interesting. You took control of your own destiny in that sense, without necessarily you realizing at the time that that's what you were doing. I don't know. Maybe you did.
I probably didn't consciously think about it at the time, Topher. Yeah. So, and it was also something that gave me a sense of purpose too when I started my family. So probably a bit older than you guys were.
Yep.
And even taking that time out of the workforce, because having my children later in life, so you go from someone that was identified by virtue of your occupation, which was reasonably prestigious, and your qualifications, to now becoming a mother. And I really struggled with that loss of identity.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
I did.
Right. Okay.
So I found mothering to be like really boring.
I really want to touch on that, but I want to touch on this one by Ethiopia Brute first. Very interesting chat. Amazing how far we've come from gender discrimination and how far back we're willing to go with discrimination in general all of a sudden. And this is why I thought this chat would be very, very valuable. This is your comment there is spot on for why I believe this chat is really valuable and really timely. Heading into Christmas, heading into when we're going to be catching up with a bunch of people that have very different views, and some of them have views that amount to discrimination. Now, I have an anecdote on that I want to give, but I'm not going to, because I think it's more important that we come back to what you were saying about your transition into motherhood.
Yes.
And I'll come back to the anecdote on discrimination a little bit later. You found motherhood boring. You felt that you lost your identity in what you just said.
Yes. I expected that a switch would turn on and it would be the ultimate fulfillment. And that didn't happen for me.
Yep.
And I felt immense guilt about that.
Yeah.
Topher. Yeah. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yep.
But today I would say that's just not my thing.
But back then you didn't have the option of it not being your thing. You're a woman. You have to feel good about being a mother. That was the cultural expectation. Yeah. And I mean, my wife's similar. You know, she had a somewhat eventful birth of our first child, ended up in an emergency Caesar. 2 days later, she wanted a laptop back because she was bored and she wanted to be doing some work. So she's sitting there trying to recover from a C-section with a laptop perched on a shrinking belly, and trying to get work done and keep up with clients. Not because she had to. There was nothing that urgent, but because that's just the way her brain was wired. Whereas I'm perfectly happy changing nappies and taking kids for walks and doing that sort of stuff. And, you know, she's just not wired that way. But I think having been another decade or so later, decade and a bit later than when you had your children, I think attitudes had shifted enough by then that it was more allowed than what it was when you went through that.
Yeah, that's probably it would be very rare to find a man. And when I had my kids, that there would be a fellow that would be the full-time carer of those children. That would be, I can't think of one actually example.
So discrimination is a really interesting thing, and we are seeing a reintroduction of it now.
Can I also say that breastfeeding my children at and I was living in Adelaide at the time, at the Adelaide Museum, and being absolutely like stared down at with those eyeballs because I was breastfeeding at the museum. Yeah, I can't imagine that happening today.
So that never even crossed my mind as an issue until my wife and I, with our firstborn, he was 4 months old, we went over to America. We were in Tennessee, we were in Nashville, Tennessee. And my wife says to me, "Let's go to Hooters." I'm like, my wife is taking me to Hooters? Like, what in the world is going on? I'm like, okay, fine. Turns out that the myth of Hooters is very much outdated. What they wear is more than what I used to teach dancing.
Yeah.
Right. I've danced with plenty of girls wearing a lot less. So it's not as exciting as you might be led to believe, fellas. Anyway, we went to Hooters. We got some wings, I think, and dipping sauces and that typical American sort of stuff. And then it was time for Winston to have a feed. So away my wife goes. She feeds him. We didn't think anything of it. But then one of the Hooters girls comes over and she says, "Oh, I love that. I love that you just do that." And it was like, this is amazing, like carrying on like she'd never seen it before. And this was my first real sort of glimpse of, hang on, there are parts of the world where this stuff is not normal.
Yeah.
And for me in Melbourne, this is really very normal. And that leads into the anecdote I was going to give a moment ago. Sorry, did you have?
No.
So Edwina is struggling at the moment with a particular client's situation. It's not the client that's the problem, it's the situation. Because this is something that we've been very not immune to. Immune to it at a personal level, yes, but we've never even really seen it. It hasn't happened in our vision before. And that is a situation where there is a woman who is trying to buy a house, has the finances, has the real savings, all that stuff. So my wife's a mortgage broker. She's helping with the money, with getting the loan. She keeps putting in offers on houses and keeps getting knocked back. And she's now arrived at a situation where she had a real estate agent admit to her that hers was the biggest offer by more than $10,000.
Yes.
And the seller chose a lower offer instead of hers. Now, I can understand if someone was renting, there might be, you might be concerned about someone's stability of work, or there might be other things where the money's not the main thing.
Not if you're selling.
But if someone's buying from you, you just get the conveyancer to get the settlement to happen. You've got their money. Why do you care? Well, this woman's Sudanese. And the person that she's been going with, who already owns a house, to look at these properties is another Sudanese friend of hers, again, a female.
Yes.
And so they've been traveling around looking at these houses, talking to the real estate agents, putting in the offers, getting absolutely nowhere. And they're putting in, and they now know for a fact that they're putting in very fair offers. And the friend who owns a house, also Sudanese, realized she bought her house without the agent having ever met her. And she was using an Anglo name. And suddenly we're looking at this going, she is literally being discriminated against, either on the basis of the color of her skin and where she was born, or on the basis of being a woman. But given that women do buy houses all the time, this does genuinely appear to be, and I'm not someone, again, I'm not quick to cry racism, but this genuinely looks like people are actually willing to cost themselves $10,000 for the sake of not selling their house to someone of the wrong. It explodes my brain that this is still around.
Yeah.
But in 2021, where we have government introduced discrimination between the jabbed and the unjabbed, etc., you kind of go, right, that's why it was so easy to do that, is because people still hold these kinds of ideas, and maybe under the surface, maybe buried a little deeper than they were in the 1980s, but they're still there. And it's very easy. It's very easy to bring them back to the surface now. So when you made the leap out of finance into business,
for myself,
for yourself, pretty big call, pretty ballsy. Now, you came out of an industry where you had to be ballsy already.
Yes.
So, we already knew that about you. You were ballsy. That we can see. Did you expect it? Why did you do it? What was the dream you were chasing? What was the upside that you were chasing?
Okay, so I'd had a couple of cracks at it, Topher, when I had my children. So what I did in absolute confidence that I was going to switch into mothering and just be fabulous at it. I resigned my position because I had a national sales role. And I thought, there's no way I can continue to travel around the country and have a baby. So with confidence, supreme confidence, I resigned. And so my first foray into self-employment was as a consultant to operators in the industry. So that's what I did when I had my children. When my daughter started kinder, I went out of that consultancy role, which I was able to do between carrying the kids, putting them in a little bit of family daycare, managing that. So I was able to fulfill that need to do something. Because mothering was just boring.
And at the same time, it wasn't as though you needed Jason to be a stay-at-home dad or anything. You were still.
I didn't need him to do that. And in Adelaide, I also had good family support around as well. So first foray, I went back into the corporate world when my daughter was 4. And that then moved me to Melbourne. That was during the GFC.
Okay.
I
2008,
took a voluntary redundancy from the role that I had. And I thought long and hard because of my age about what it is I wanted to do. For the first time in my life with intention, I took 3 months off. And I did nothing. I accepted no offers. I wouldn't and just to give myself clear air.
Yep.
And what I thought about was what I enjoyed doing.
Okay.
What I enjoyed doing, and I realized that I had a talent for, was in education and training people in the industry how to take on challenging. I was able to dispel that. I was able to educate people quite effectively. So I decided to train and get a qualification in training and assessment. In doing that, our industry went through an amazing sense of change, and anybody that joined the industry from outside of the industry then had to be mentored for 2 years. So I saw an opportunity in the market.
Yeah.
And that would marry up my qualification, my desire to now get into education, and also our industry had this gap in the market. Yeah. So I brought all of them together and launched my business.
Okay. The big thing that comes to my mind as you're telling me about that is the mortgage broking industry in the finance world was still a very misogynistic world.
Yes.
And you were coming in not at the bottom to be a little shit kicker, mortgage processing person. You were coming in to be a trainer. You were putting yourself into a position where you were saying, hey, all of you should come and learn something from me. How well was that received? And I'm assuming it was received differently in different circles.
It was when I was doing the research and writing the program, there was a huge amount of support for what it is that I was doing. Which is great. So a lot of followers, a lot of supporters.
Yep.
But when you launch the product to market and people have got to pay for it, that's a very different equation.
Yeah.
So all that support just went quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to go low on pricing so that I could get some people on board. So I was able to demonstrate outcomes.
Yeah.
That's when I was able to grow the business. And then it got recognized by our peak industry body.
Yep.
And I entered into a joint venture with them to deliver a national standard.
Yeah. So this is a particularly interesting moment because it was somewhere in that journey that Edwina became one of your clients.
Yes.
And I'm going to brag on both my wife and both of these lovely ladies for a moment because my wife became the youngest person ever to win a national award in mortgage broking.
Correct.
And she did that under your tutelage and your guidance as her mentor. And you've continued. You're now essentially a business consultant and mentor. And my wife's business goes from strength to strength. Are you joining us, are you, babe? Okay. Okay. Well, my wife is now joining us. She's going to sit on your side.
The other side of the screen.
So we can talk to her, and I'm sure she will throw in some comments along the way as well. It's become a family affair. But you threw everything. You mentioned this national curriculum that you worked on.
Yes.
And you threw everything into this. And this is something that entrepreneurs and business people often have to do, is to sink enormous resources into something in the hope that it pays off.
Yes.
How did it go for you?
It was mixed.
Mixed, I think, is a little generous.
Yes, it is generous. So it went very, very well. When you open up a product to the wider audience and you have a lot of critics, there's also something to be said about partnerships and also and tripartite agreements and going into business with organizations is about ultimately what happens when things turn bad.
An asymmetrical relationship is especially complicated. Where you're a small business trying to get a relationship with a big business is very challenging.
But look, I always like to think that one of the pioneers put mentoring on the map, changed the shape of the industry. It didn't turn out. It ended up not going well at the end, but there was a number of good years. So, and you've just got to be, when you're the business owner, there's nowhere else you can go. So
no, that's right.
You can't just be sooky. You can be sooky for a bit, and then you've got to dust yourself off.
You can lick your wounds.
And you go, well, what are my options here?
Okay, so let me go a little bit deeper if I can, because you hadn't just invested an enormous amount of time into this curriculum. You'd moved into a new office in the expectation. You were anticipating a really big contract. All the indicators were really good, and you were in good faith pouring enormous resources into that. You moved into a new office. You put on new staff. You restructured the company and kind of how it worked in the background, all in good faith as these negotiations were going ever so well.
Yep.
And then at really the very much the last minute, when you were expecting they were going to announce publicly that they were picking up your curriculum, they just turned around and what?
Went somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yep. Crushed.
Pause for a minute.
Yep.
Because it's very easy and you want to kind of go, oh, but then I did this and so no. What's that reality? You go home at the end of the day, you're talking to your husband.
I was literally crushed. It was at a national convention is when I found out. And
so, you were out
so it was
in
quite
public,
yeah.
Oh.
And I was crushed. I literally hid for a week.
Mm.
No one could get me.
Mm. Fair enough.
Mm.
So do you find yourself thinking back on that now with resentment, or, does that still have an emotional anchor?
It probably still does, less and less so, Topher. There are lessons learned from that.
Mm.
I'm not bitter about that. Not today.
Mm.
I literally at the time did not know how I was going to get out of the other side of that.
Yeah.
But I had a responsibility, hey, to a lot of people.
Mm.
And literally after a week, by the time I returned all of those phone calls and messages from my team who said, we've got your back, T. Yeah. We're here.
Yeah.
We just we've written it once.
Mm-hmm.
We can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And this time for ourselves.
To what degree did that challenge your own sense of identity? I mean, you talked before about becoming a mother and the impact that had on your sense of identity and realizing that you didn't emotionally respond the way that you expected that you would,
mm-hmm.
etc. To what degree did the loss of a business or the loss of that part of the business that you'd invested so deeply in affect your identity?
So there's waves, yeah? Again, I had to get on with things. I had to very quickly, when I started the mentoring business, I had to rebrand myself as no longer a BDM or a business development manager for a lender, and have people identify me as quickly as possible as a mentor.
Yep.
So I had to work, you had to double down and do it. So I've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When I lost my reputation when they didn't pick up my program, then there was a lot of reputational gossip and damage. I had to trust that in time and also in that the spirit of everything that we did was always for the betterment of our clients and our brokers and the betterment of the industry. So to hold firm to that, Topher, was something that I had to hold, I absolutely steadfastly had to hang on to and have to trust that over time, truth would be revealed, and hold a sense of grace going into suing people and going in and counterattacking trolls on social media and adding fire to that. Fueled that fire. I just didn't do it. Yeah. I was able to reshape reputation. Then when I quit the mentoring new to industry brokers, I had to then very quickly have the industry re-identify me as a coach of award-winning brokerages. So I like to think that I've become quite a master of doing that
of reinventing yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
and if it was a smooth sea the whole way through, I wouldn't have developed that sense of being able to do that, which I think is a skill that I pass on to others now.
A smooth sea doth not a good captain make.
You can write your own story. Yeah, you can be your own media company. As long as what you're doing is true. Because if you're bullshitting, right, time will expose that deficiency. Yeah. And I think that's why I've succeeded.
That's the key.
Despite failures, yeah.
The key thing for me that you said was, in time, truth will be revealed.
Yes.
And that's something that I think a lot of us are kind of hanging our hope on in current circumstances, is that in time, if you were on the side of the truth, time is your friend.
Correct.
If you're bullshitting, Time is your enemy.
Correct.
And I would say there's an awful lot of bullshitting coming out of Spring Street right now, and time is not on Daniel Andrews' side. So just hold on to that little gem. In time, truth will be revealed. So you've had to reinvent yourself multiple times. Each time having to, recover from damage that's been done through no fault of your own, and assumptions that get made. People make assumptions. Oh, well, why didn't they pick up Therese's program? Oh, there must have been something wrong with Therese's program. She mustn't have been very good. It mustn't have been very well written. People infer all kinds of things into a moment like that. How do you feel now about the place that you found yourself as a coach for other people's businesses, etc.? Do you feel satisfied, or do you find yourself thinking back on that and going, oh, but if only...
No, I don't waste my energy on that, Topher.
Okay.
Yeah. And I like to think that what I can do is inspire others because everybody is going to go through tough times. And I'm pretty much an open book. So my relationship with my clients, it's very much business and personal all meshed into one. So I'm quite an open book.
Well, here
They've got struggles with children.
Yeah.
I got teenagers, mate. I can tell you, it's no freaking walk in the park. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had depression in my life. I recognize the signs and symptoms. I understand the debilitation of high anxiety. So I can recognize that in people, and maybe part of it is being able to lead and guide others. And if you say that you've been a wounded soldier, then there's some credibility in that. And I've survived.
So I didn't want to bring it up, but you've brought it up now that you've had your own struggles with mental health, depression, etc. That moment when, if we can go back to the moment when you didn't get that contract and the way it happened and how public that was, would you say that week was a week in depression, or did you manage to keep yourself out of that? What techniques?
Yeah, I did, but I was probably staving it. There was a delayed response probably about 18 months later. So I ended up on, I recognized very reasonably quickly for me, probably a week, I recognized that I was not moving. I was not getting out of bed. I was totally swamped, and I knew the signs. So I went straight away and got on antidepressants, which I was on for a couple of years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now you mentioned you've got some teenage children, and life throws curveballs at you at the most challenging possible times. Being a teenager in the last 2 years has been freaking tough. What a time to be coming of age in the last 2 years. And that's taken its toll on your family as well. How do you as a parent find the balance between being there for your kids, supporting them, etc., versus also letting them come of age and find their feet and spread their wings in a moment in history like this?
It's really tough. Yeah. Whatever you need, there's a couple of things. So I think whatever you need them to feel that this is a safe space to talk to you in confidence about things that might actually rock your world. And you need to do that without judgment. Otherwise, it's not a safe space. So, and then being able to picking your moment and giving some advice around that, Topher, is one. Second is they're teenagers. You need to bring them out to Muhammad. Yeah. If you want to connect with them, then you need to go to their playing field. So if that means watching Parks and Rec with my 18-year-old daughter, because that's what she'd like to do, then that's what I'll do. My son's a gamer, so I'm just shit at anything that is gamer related, but I will jump on a Mario Party, right? Because that's what he wants to do. He's going to have drunk, trashy, movie night with his mates next week. So, and he's invited me, so I will go. Nice. That's what you do.
You've got a good relationship.
My husband is going to bed.
Well, if they're inviting you to their drunk, trashy movie nights, you've done something right. I mean, I'm not an advocate of this idea that you have to be best friends with your kids. I think that's dangerous. But as they grow into adulthood, you should hopefully find yourself getting closer once they're through that mid-teen kind of phase. And they'll, even if they hate you when they think you're not cool when they're teenagers, they'll model you. And I suppose, especially in this last 2 years of lockdowns,
when we're all in the same freaking loud, opinionated people, all in the same house, is if you can model if they can see how you handle stress, how you can handle an out of control client, then they can see that you can manage your way through that without losing your cool. Then my daughter struggles with mental health. So if she can see strategies in action that I'm using, she may not even recognize it, but subliminally she can see some strategies in action. Then I think that's also a great thing that I can do as a parent.
Modeling the behavior. And you're not wrong. Even when they're having an argument with you, they're still watching how you react. They're still learning from you. That's a good way to look at it, actually. Every moment is a learning opportunity.
And the other thing is to think about what really matters. Does getting like the 100th piercing through here, does it really actually matter, or does it matter more that she's happy?
So how do you guide someone then who you're their mum and you're aware and they're aware that they have mental health challenges, and this is going to be something that they're going to need to stay on top of, presumably over the course of the rest of their life? I mean, it's just a part of who they are and a part of how they're going to have to find a way of living. You know, my wife started a business for lifestyle design. Well, someone in your child's situation is going to have to factor in their mental health into the decisions they make. How do you guide them to actually accept that reality without the pity party, without the, looking down on themselves or allowing others to look down? Like, how do you come to terms with the fact that I've got this health issue and I'm going to have to manage it, and that's okay?
So again, I think with my daughter, she sees me being who I am unapologetically. I think that is probably a good confidence builder for her. I think that's a big thing. We're very open in our house with communications, no matter, even if it's sometimes things that you don't want to, you go, my life would be better if I just didn't know that. But that you are loved regardless, and that you're accepted in our family regardless. And I have very vocal, confident children who don't mind, who are quite courageous in voicing their opinion.
That's good.
And I think that they will take that they will enter a better workforce than I entered, than you entered, than Eddie entered. They will enter a much more enlightened workforce full of purpose, and they've got the negotiating power, and they know that. And my daughter is very open about her mental illness.
Okay.
And she is very aware.
I didn't want to say that it was your daughter, but you're
She's
free
very
to say
aware of her triggers.
Okay.
And I think if you're not trying to hide secrets, it can be quite liberating.
You've actually touched on a couple of things along the way that have made me want to mention Carly, who I did a slow chat with some time ago, who was the woman who made a video on Instagram that went viral. She was talking about the reality of being a small business owner under the lockdowns, in and out of lockdowns, and how that was impacting her. It went viral, 40 million views. Someone, without her knowing at first and without her asking for it, someone started a GoFundMe that went crazy. She asked them to shut it down. They said, no, we're trying to raise lots of money for you because we all feel bad for you. They meant it for the right reasons. But then a current affair, well, actually then an ex-business partner of Carly's comes out of the woodwork, wants to try and trash her name because she's got a liquidated company in her background. She ran a fashion business for 10 years. Now, that's a successful business. You keep a business going for 10 years, that's a successful business. She went into liquidation. Was it the same year that Lorna Jane went into liquidation, and other big fashion brands all going under as well? Okay. She copped it in the same way that they did. She went under the same way that they did. Her ex-business partner comes out of the woodwork, goes to a current affair. And a current affair ambush her in a car park. They know all the psychological triggers. They got her worked up. They got her crying. And they did this massive hit piece all over national television on her. Her local newspaper down in her area published articles comparing her to Christopher Skase. People found out that there was this crowdfunding thing that was making money for her. So now she's a scammer. Even though she didn't start it, she asked them to shut it down. She handed the money back. She did all the right things, and they absolutely came for her and tried to destroy her. And the comment that you made earlier that made me first think of her, and then this most recent comment as well, was making your own destiny and being your own media company. She needed a little while. She licked her wounds. She
and you need that time,
turned everything off
yeah.
and walked away from social media for a little while. And she called me and we had a chat about what to do. And she was getting advice from a crisis management company that were basically telling her, oh, well, your social media days are done. You'll never have any public profile again.
Yeah, but I think that's what they do when you get
by default. That's what they do. And I said, no, you need to take a minute out, but then you need to do exactly this. You need to actually get in and control the media around you and actually own this as part of your story. And most importantly, bring it into your story so it's not a skeleton in the closet, like you just said. If it's a skeleton in the closet, people always have.
You're always
power.
running from it.
You're running from it. You're anxious about it. Anyone who knows has power.
That's exactly right.
If you're the one that says, this is a part of my story, and this is how I then dealt with it and learned from it and grew from it and moved on. In the case of your daughter, this is a part of who I am, but this is what I've learned to do about it. This is, if I do this, please understand it's probably because of that. And that's just me managing what's happening. Now, all of a sudden, what's someone going to do? Oh, she's got mental health issues. Yes. And, oh, she's got a liquidated company in her background. Yes. And, and it just completely disempowers that out of their hands. So coming forward to today for you, you've been mentoring and helping a lot of mortgage brokers through what has been a ridiculously tumultuous time.
Yeah.
Every time house showings are shut down, all of a sudden there's half of your client base gets halved because they can only do refinances. There are people losing their jobs, so now they can't even get refinances, or banks classifying industries as being at risk or risky due to COVID shutdowns and things. And so even though you've got a job and you've got the pay slips, they won't accept them anymore. How do you guide people through running a business at a time like that?
Well, okay. So probably for the majority of my clients, a drop in sales is not an issue. Efficiencies are an issue.
Okay.
Yeah. So brokers are at the mercy of an external provider, which is a lender.
Yeah.
Which, because of these tumultuous times, is taking, it's crazy, like sometimes 45 days, business days. So that's about 2 months, to even pick up a file.
Yeah.
So that slows down the efficiencies and the productivity of a brokerage significantly. So probably a lot of focus has been around how we manage that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you been recommending people laying off staff and that sort of thing? Like how do you survive in a time like this when, due to factors beyond your control, your efficiency is being shot, and by implication, your profitability is being shot?
Yeah, true. Again, I would say with a lot of my brokerages, they have a good nest egg because they've been in business long enough that they've got a good sort of annuity trail, if you like, annuity income.
Yep.
So not such an issue. Their problem is just disappointing clients around timeframes.
Okay.
Yeah. And giving clients certainty around their ability to go to auction and bid at auction. There are those sorts of things, or brokers that are putting in the work and not getting paid because their clients are just being unsuccessful.
Yeah, not able to get that property. Yeah, so your industry is a particularly weird one, and I know it well because my wife's in the industry, where brokers do all the work up front and then don't get paid until usually a month after the property settles, which can be 3 months after they've put in an offer, which can be 2 months after they've started working with the client. So it can be 6 months from the work.
Big cash flow challenges for brokers.
To actually getting paid.
6 months, maybe.
Why would anyone want to be a broker? Like, it just seems like a ridiculous way to try and run an industry. What's the appeal? Because there are a lot of them out there.
There's 16,000 brokers out there
in Australia.
Yes.
So what's the appeal, and what was the appeal for you? I mean, surely you knew that when you got into the industry. I mean, you were never a broker specifically.
I was.
Oh, you were a broker. Excuse me. Okay.
Back when the earth was cooling. Yeah.
Well, that was only
like in the first. I was a broker in the mid-90s.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I missed that. I missed that part of your sort of your journey. So why why would anyone want to do that? What's the appeal?
Because this is a moment in time too, Topher. Like the challenges that the industry faces today is a moment in time. They'll be fixed. COVID, despite the challenges that it presented to this industry and many industries, it fast forward by a couple of years, a lot of investments and technologies in digitization and those efficiencies will really come to the fore in the next couple of years. This is a moment in time. 60% of all first homeowners searching are going to go to a broker instead of a bank. It's a total change and total shift. And it's a prediction it's going to go to 80%. Because of the advice piece that brokers bring.
As opposed to a bank just says, well, which of our loans is best for you? A broker says, which of the loans from all of these different lenders is best for you?
So why get into it? Because this is a moment in time. The fundamentals of this industry is strong. The growth is huge. And there's also a lot of, no disrespect to my generation, but there's a lot of people in this industry of my vintage plus 10 years that are going to exit. And those brokerages will be taken over by younger, smarter people that are invested in
digital efficiencies and everything that you were talking about. Okay. So from your point of view then, Therese, if we can step away from the industry specifically, and even step away from COVID and all that sort of stuff, what would you say is something that you are most proud of that you've either done or who you've been or a difference that you've made? Pick absolutely anything. What is something that you feel very proud of being a part of?
That I brought humanity to the industry.
Okay. So this is when you first took the step into being not a tutor, a mentor in the industry.
Perhaps, but I didn't appreciate it then. I think that realization is only something that's hit me in the last couple of years. And
so it's something you recognize in hindsight. It wasn't a mission that you were on. It's just something that you recognize in hindsight.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And now I probably double down on that. This is an industry of stories of Australians from a mix of nationalities and diverse backgrounds that have got challenges, that have dreams and aspirations. And what I think the biggest difference I make is just bringing that human piece to the recognition of that, Topher. We can get caught up in the numbers and lose sight of that. So I work with brands and brokerages around what's your brand story. The attraction model is your values and the difference you want to make in the world. And that's the human touch. And I think that's what I bring. So our industry focuses a lot of compliance and economics and valuations and science and data. But that's not what people are looking for. They're looking for connection and saying, hey, with me, I can make all your dreams happen. Let me back you for the next 20 years and you'll have a portfolio that will be amazing and you'll have no stress. Like that's what I want to hear. So I'm trying to, I think I'm most proud of bringing that to the industry.
Okay. Can I flip the question on its head?
Yes.
What's something that you look back on now as a lesson learned, something that knowing what you know now, you would have done very differently to what you did at the time?
Jesus.
Now, by the way, I don't give my guests warning about the questions at all. So I'm literally throwing her in the deep end here, and you're going to learn the answer at the same time as I do.
It is don't enter into partnerships without having a really solid agreement about what you do in the event that there's a stalemate, a disagreement, or some party wants to exit. That would be the lesson learned.
Okay. And that comes out of that moment that we talked about before. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I've got some interesting things happening at the moment with agreements. Obviously, I'm in the middle of post-production for the Battleground Melbourne documentary, and I've got two amazing musicians that have come on board. One of whom is Jack Jones or Erwin Thomas from Southern Suns. You've heard his song. I played it a couple of weeks ago during a slow chat. There's another one from an artist up in Sydney called Mandy Rag. Brilliant songwriter. And it was really interesting to me, two very different approaches to the whole sort of agreements and paperwork side of things. I've been blessed in my life to be surrounded with people who are, almost all of them, good to their word, right? And so I've done a lot of my deals over the years on a handshake and nothing more. And you know what? I've been burnt once. And what that cost me was less than what the lawyers would have cost me if I'd gotten them involved in every one of those deals that I'd made along the way. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but that's how I operate, right? I like to do my business face to face because I can get the measure of somebody, and then when we shake hands, we can move ahead. Others, of course, have been burned more than what I have, and so they want the lawyers involved, or they've received advice that says, no, you have to have lawyers involved because things can go wrong. You've had things go wrong, right? And so I had these two musicians, one of whom I pitched what I wanted from them, and they said, brilliant, love it, I get it, let me get back to you with a sample track. The other one said, brilliant, I love it, I get it, my lawyer will be in touch. And seeing, and I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong. Like my handshake trust may turn around and really bite me in the ass someday. And I might be sitting there going, oh, well, that's a bit crap. And maybe I should have had the lawyers involved all this time. But it's very, very interesting how people's experiences and getting burned can really then influence, and unfortunately we lost quite a lot of time with the lawyers. And the whole project obviously is happening on a very short timeline. And there was a little while there where I wasn't sure that we were going to be able to get the deal done, let alone the music made, to then actually be able to move ahead. In your experience, so I'm coming back to this lesson of I guess having the contract written in such a way that it's clear what happens in the event that it all kind of falls apart. In your case, without, again, I know a bit about your story because we talk and we've but there was an intellectual property issue in your case where, correct me if I'm wrong, they went on to use significant amounts of your intellectual property.
Yes.
And that's, choosing not to use a supplier, well, that's any business's prerogative. Choosing not to use a supplier, but then actually using their content is a whole different kettle of fish. Can you be more specific about the lesson that you've learned out of that? What could have been in a contract that might have made the difference for you in that case?
Oh, God.
You're not a lawyer, but just as a business person, having experienced that, what's the lesson for me as someone who operates on trust and may well get myself burned at some point in time as a result of that? What's the lesson in that for me?
Well, I think own the trademark because you've got power, yeah? So, as you know, I'm in a dispute at the moment, which I can't get on too much with. But sure. And I've had lawyers involved in that. You need the other party to also respect the demands, which they're not doing.
Yeah.
It's in abeyance.
Okay. Right. Okay.
But trademarking has given me a protection, which is something that I took out and went through the process of a few years back. So I think if you do have anything that's really precious, I would suggest doing trademarking, and you can use an intellectual property lawyer.
Yeah.
It's not all that difficult to do it yourself.
Yeah. Well, in the case of Drive Go-Karting, where the intellectual property is the core of the business, we had that profession. Yep. We spent $30,000 just on the lawyers, let alone all the patent fees and exploration fees, where they check to see whether it's whether you're infringing on someone else's patent and all that. All up, it's been a $50,000 investment in the intellectual property on that business, because that's a multi-million-dollar business. But for most people, and for every other business I've ever been in, it's a tiny little business. It's worth, in any given year, it might be worth a few tens of thousands of dollars. And it's just very difficult to then reach into the pocket and pay the lawyers and,
it's $1,500 a letter. Yeah.
Yeah. And they want to hand you some wad of paper. They chop down an entire tree just for a single contract. Yeah. The reason I'm exploring it with as much uncertainty as I am is because this is a genuine area where I know how I do it. I've no idea if that's the right way.
These days, everything goes to my lawyer.
Okay.
For
so
vetting.
You're on that side of that. Okay. And so you've got a lawyer that you just it's a go-to person. They know you. They know what you're about.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Things to think about. So Matthew says, Topher, light her cigar. Do you want me to relight your cigar, or are you good for now?
Oh, no. I think I'm Because I'm not smoking it. No, relight it. I can relight it.
It's you need to light the high side there and just burn that
down
a little
bit.
Yeah. Just to burn that down a little bit. As it gets more uneven, it won't really burn properly. Can I get involved, please? Sorry. Thank you.
For God's sake.
Now where is that? Okay. So word of advice, cigars. When they
don't let it do that.
when they do that on you, you need to intervene a little bit earlier. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scrape out all of the ash, all of the burnt tobacco.
And fix it up.
Because we don't want to be relighting burnt tobacco. That's not a nice flavor. Cigars are all about the taste, the flavor, and reburning.
And it not being too ashy on one side.
Yeah, reburning already burnt tobacco. Not a great way to enjoy a cigar, but that's okay. So I've wiped that away. I'm now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on relighting the high side, and I'm kind of hitting it from the inside here so that I don't burn the outside. You can see that's already been touched. I'm just going to hit it from the inside and make sure that we get it nice and warm. Do it nice and slowly. Quite a lot of heat on that high side, and then just a little bit of heat on the low side, not nearly as much. Back to the high side. Get that nice and warm throughout. Now, if you give that a couple of good puffs.
There we go.
That should be good for you now. Okay. I think most of us fall into this category, AAPI. If you're too stupid to self-negotiate, use a lawyer. Look, I may very well be too stupid to self-negotiate, but I'm so stupid that I don't realize I'm too stupid to self-negotiate, so I do it anyway. What do you hope for, looking ahead, for your kids in Victoria and the way that it's changed in the last few years? Was Victoria your forever home?
No, I
know you've travelled around, but in terms of once you settled here, was the plan to stay here, or have you always?
The plan was not to stay here. The plan was to move up to Queensland, and now I've got 18 and 20-year-old that don't want to leave Melbourne because their friendship group and their and boyfriends and everything are now here. So my husband would like to go to Byron Bay. I don't know that I want to move that far away from my children. So this is something that we need to think about over the next few years. So my husband is like, heck them, like I want to go.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm totally at peace with leaving them behind in Melbourne. Yeah.
That's the.
I can do my job. It doesn't matter. I can do I can do it anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, you won't be able to come over here and have cigars.
No.
But who knows? Maybe we'll move to Queensland. I don't know. No, we're moving to the Caribbean. We're not going to Queensland. If we want the warmer weather, we're going to do it properly. So
I don't think I'll move there while that Anastasia is there, though.
Well, this is what I wanted to get to is, has all of what's happened in the last 2 years changed your opinion of Victoria, of Australia, your thinking in terms of where you want to live and that sort of stuff? Or are you more of the view that it's going to pass over and it'll go back to normal?
I think it will go back to normal. I think when we look at this coronavirus shit in this moment in time, it'll be a 2 or 3 year thing, and then we'll go in 100 years, and what on earth are we doing? And even I freaking hate Queensland and West Australia at the moment, and that's irrational, right? It's just that I don't like their premier's decisions, and I know people in WA, and I know all my family's in Queensland.
Yeah,
I actually don't hate them at all. I hate that I haven't been able to see my mum in 2.5 years, and it'll probably be. I have no confidence to fly to Queensland.
No. Well, why would you after what just happened with the New South Wales planes? Now, my understanding is that decision got reversed. And viewers, you might be able to help me out here because I'm a little bit out of the loop. My understanding is 2 planes, one from Newcastle, one from Sydney, I think it was, landed. Someone tested positive. Everyone was thrown into 14 days quarantine. They have let them out, have they? Okay.
Yeah, so now what they've said, so they've had to change that because there was an uproar because that 14 days meant hotel quarantine over Christmas.
Yeah.
For 2 flight loads of people. Was that 350 people?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just about them. It's like there was so many cancellations apparently that day of flights.
Yeah. Well, people,
and I lived in freaking far north Queensland. So many of my friends are tourism operators.
Yes.
And they will be crushed.
Yeah. Finally, it's over. We're going to start to get business again. Nope. No, you're not. Yeah. So, Agate Master, where are you? You're saying we're a 2-tiered society. So that's Queensland, I assume, because they've just brought in a bunch of additional restrictions on the unvaccinated anyway. On the 17th, yeah, which we've had in Victoria for quite some time.
Yeah. But it's new because my fam's up there, right?
Yeah.
So they're going, we've got all these freedoms now, and then it's actually going to regress.
So how do you feel as someone who, whether for your own personal reasons or because you felt you needed to for your job or what have you, you chose to get vaccinated?
Yep.
And now all of a sudden they're talking, oh, you're going to have a booster. And then there's probably going to be another one after that. Now all of a sudden it's turned into like an antivirus subscription service, like on your computer, right? You have to get updates regularly. How do you feel about that? Do you feel you've been lied to? Do you feel like...
No, I don't. I'll get the booster. The reason that I'm vaccinated and have the booster is because I want to travel and because of my business. Yeah. I'm ambivalent as to... all right, it's okay. I'll do what I need to do. I want to go and see my mum. Hey, and I can't. She's now bought into. So I haven't seen her new house. She annoys me because she's so like at peace with it all. Like I wanted to be angry that she hasn't seen her daughter. Yeah, Barb, if you're listening.
So it's interesting, you chose to do it.
She's like fearful because they're in Queensland. Yeah, they like 10 people have got a sniffle. She won't fly down to Victoria because she may not get back, and then she's got to pay for 14 days hotel quarantine, and that's a shame. She's 78. Like something could happen.
Yeah, and just that time, you can't get time back. It's all very well and good to say, oh, look, it's only money. It's only a while. It's only a certain season. There are aspiring athletes that have had horrible interruptions to their training that won't make it to the Olympics, or if they do make it to the Olympics, they won't perform the way they would have. There are families that are missing out. I mean, in the worst scenarios, there are families that were being denied compassionate travel and missing funerals and missing final farewells and all sorts of things like that. And you don't get time back. It has been said, and I want to put it to you, of whether this is true for you or whether you disagree with this, that a significant number of people who have been vaccinated weren't vaccinated against the virus. They were vaccinated against unemployment or against not being able to see family or against being able to run their business. It was actually, those were really the reasons why.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. It is for me, probably, and it is for my family. It would be the case for a lot of people, but I think there's also a lot of people that are afraid of getting really, really ill.
Yeah.
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 Oh, I do think that without a doubt. And there are people now that don't want to go to any big events in case that becomes a super spreader event. So and it's a fear.
Yeah. And now I have to home quarantine because I was a secondary contact or a close contact or what have you. Yeah.
So I think there is genuine, there's a few, so that then has all sorts of implications, apart from your social restrictions, which is not enjoyable. But if you're a casual worker and now I'm a close contact,
Yeah.
And there's not, I don't know, I'm not across it, but I don't think there's a lifeline now for you if you're a casual employee, and you're now a close contact. So does that compel people to want to get tested? I wouldn't.
No. Why would you? Well, it's been said that if everyone stopped getting tested, the whole
there would be no cases.
It would just kind of disappear overnight. And if you look at the all-cause mortality during 2020, there's no big uptick. Ignoring Australia, we had the lockdowns. They can claim, oh, it's because of the lockdowns. No, around the world, there wasn't a big uptick. There was an uptick, but it wasn't a big uptick in all-cause mortality. 2021, funnily enough, is looking like actually more people are going to die in 2021. And I won't go into my theory as to what might be driving that because that'll get me banned off lots of social media platforms. But we have this idea that we're trying to extend people's lives, but in order to do that, we're taking years out of people's lives. And they're not dead, but they're not able to live.
A big problem, and I was talking to somebody earlier today, so they've got a preteen, so who's had 2 years. So you literally saying with me, you cannot get into a psychologist or a psychiatrist for months. And that's all the damage of lockdowns. And from like 8-year-olds, hey, all the way up to like the spike in mental health crises.
It's phenomenal to me. And then to see the political reaction. So I don't know if you saw this, but the Victorian government has announced a new levy on the payroll tax to raise, I think it's an extra $10 million a year towards mental health services.
Yeah, okay.
Right? You go, okay, well, clearly mental health services are in demand. But can we stop to think for a moment that maybe this is now the government trying to fix a problem that the government kind of created? You know,
and they may very well have created, but we still got to deal with the fact.
We've still got to deal with the fallout.
From it, yeah.
But here we are in a situation where for a long time they were denying that there was any impact. For a long time they were
which is probably why you can't get into a mental health specialist for, like, literally, if you try today, there's no one's got spots.
Yeah.
No one has got spots.
A chap that I interviewed for the documentary and I've been keeping in touch with since, the reason he regressed and ended up attempting suicide was actually partly because all of his mental health services, he has a history of mental health, all of those services became remote. Yeah. All of those services were now being done over Zoom, if you could get them at all.
And it's not the same, right? It's not the same. And the same with my daughter. I don't know how many Zoom consults that she just cancelled, but she wouldn't have cancelled a face-to-face. So it just didn't have the connection either.
So Gary, I'm very, very sorry to hear that. My mate had the jab on Monday, died on the Saturday. His mum died of a broken heart weeks later. So obviously a young enough guy that his mum was still here. Gary, I cannot tell you how many of those sorts of stories are in my inbox, my messages, my emails, etc. It is, well, I mean, Agate Master says it here. I'm sorry. Like, what else can you say? What else can you say? It's awful. And I think, it took literally years for thalidomide to be recognized as actually harmful. It's going to take years for the truth to really come out about this. I mean, like we said before, the truth in time, the truth comes out, and it will. But it's going to be too late for a lot of people by then. It's I'm very, very sorry to hear that, mate. It's happening far too often. So let's try and find a slightly brighter note than that one to end on, if we can. So as you look ahead, then, and you've met people all over the country. You know a lot of people. You've got networks across many different industries. What do you see happening in the future for Australia? There are different versions and different thoughts, and I've got my own thoughts, and I've shared them with my audience before. But what do you see ahead, knowing the Australian people the way that you do, and knowing this country as well as you do, having travelled and lived in so many parts of it? What's the future for Australia, do you think?
Well, I'm very optimistic just by personality. Okay. Couple of things. I think what this has brought out is maybe a resurgence in Australia about some value-added industries and this reliance that we had on just exporting raw commodities to China. I think that whole supply chain security issue will change things. It has become a big issue. It's become a big issue for the globe. And I think there's some opportunities that I hope that Australian industry will take advantage of. Yeah. I think that's very positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's always no matter what business, even a micro business, right? A reliance on one supplier. Yeah.
Particularly if that's
or one referral partnership or one anything is always a risk. We shut down our automotive industries. We were not competitive. Yeah. We had no comparative advantage. Yeah. I'm not saying reinstitute those industries, but let's do it smarter. Yeah. I think I'm very optimistic for my children. Okay. I think they will enter a much more vibrant, diverse workplace where they have a voice, and they will because they hold the balance of power. There is a dearth of talent.
Yes.
We are aging. We need to invest in young people, and they have got all the power. So they are sitting there and saying, we want to join a company with purpose. We want to join an ethical company that has sustainable. Look at Westpac shares, right? They tanked 20% since November because people don't like that they're investing in fossil fuels. Those things matter. Both my children have changed their banking provider from Big Four to a smaller bank that has a ESG policy. So they are entering a much more enlightened, more creative industry, and I think they have a voice and they have confidence. I am supremely optimistic. I identify as a 30-year-old, as everybody knows, yeah. And I am supremely optimistic about the future.
I'm 39. I identify as a grumpy 65-year-old. I just want the porch, the rocking chair, and the shotgun across my knees. That's all I'm missing.
But they will change the world. I truly believe that they will, because it's for them, the whole world is democratized. Yeah, they will not tolerate an employer that does bad things.
Yeah,
they have the confidence, because you don't like it. That's fine. I'll get a job somewhere else because I'm good at what I do.
Is that entitlement?
I understand the entitlement argument. I don't think so. I think the leaders, I think there is an entitled generation in that, but I think the leaders that will emerge, will drive great change. It might take them 10 years to get there. So I might be talking 10 years hence. So those that are there for entitled reasons, without their passion, they won't be the leaders.
I resonate with Paul's comment here. Ethical companies. How ethical has any company been to comply with Dan and his edicts? I think
so. That maybe that'll be that they will reshape this future. Yeah.
I think it's what this I think is going to do is drive a greater willingness amongst people to stand for what they believe is right.
Correct.
And for those that believe that it's all carbon emissions and that sort of thing, they will take a stronger stand on that. For people like myself that are more concerned with human rights and discrimination, etc., I've changed certain habits and buying habits.
You have
and
media
so
and outlets now.
Yep.
Everybody does. Everybody has that, and I think that this is and we're living in a collaborative culture environment too.
Yeah.
So I think they will drive great change, positive change in the globe, and we won't see this, but we will see this in 20, 30 years' time.
Yeah, it's going to take some time to flow through.
Yes.
But I think, a lot of people have looked at America and the polarization in politics in America as a bad thing. But I think we're heading in the same direction. And I'm not sure that it's a bad thing, because all it is people being willing to actually stand up for what they think is right. And we're not all going to agree on what we think is right or what the highest priority is. But I think what's gotten us...
It might reshape politics. Like, if one think about the political landscape in 10 years' time, I think it'll be dramatically different.
Yeah.
Will it be dominated by 2 or 3 parties? I don't know that it will be.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree. I think that's going to be one of the most... And that's not going to take 20 years to happen. I think we're going to see the first really clear signs of that in the coming federal election in a couple of months. And then again...
Well, both my children are voting, and they will, I'm guessing, vote not the same way as me. So they're the emerging voting class.
Yeah. And a lot more people are just becoming very aware of the importance of the vote. There's been this kind of Australians have almost been proud of not paying attention to politics. You don't talk about religion or politics at the dinner table. These are off limits. And I think what we're seeing now is people realizing that old saying, just because you ignore politics doesn't mean that politics is going to ignore you. And people are getting much more engaged now than they ever were before.
So, Therese, do you reckon that your children will vote more minor parties?
The microphone.
Yes, I do.
The microphone can't hear you, but the question was, so Edwina is sitting behind the camera here. The question was, do you think that, does Therese think that her children will vote for minor parties?
I absolutely think they will. Yes. Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing. Tell me, when you went through school, they would have had a subject called civics. Do you feel that you understand how preferential voting works?
No idea.
Yeah. And this, I think, is one of the fundamental issues that we're up against now, and one of the reasons why the minor parties have struggled so much. Yeah. So part of my role and my focus in the coming months is to help more people understand that side of things, because you can actually have your cake and eat it too. You can vote for the minor parties that resonate with you, and then if you feel the need in the upper house, you have the option. In the lower house, you have to. But in the upper house, if you feel the need, you can then include whichever major party you think is less bad. But having first passed your vote through all the other minor parties that you actually, and the more people that come to understand the power of preferential voting, I think the faster this political change is actually going to come about. As you think about your own, heading towards, not immediately, not imminently, but heading towards retirement, is Australia the right place to retire? Are you looking overseas, or are you more conscious of family and...
No, I want to be closest to my kids.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't consider moving. Ideally, I probably like the sunny coast.
Okay. Yep.
Queensland. So a lot of my friends that I would have real spiritual connections with seem to have migrated there over the last few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I moved there, I know that the kids would frequent a lot.
Can you take that out, please?
The sunny coast is very spiritual, yeah. So there's a big community there that I would like to connect with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'd like to reconnect with.
Because you lived there for a while.
I lived in far north Queensland.
Okay.
I grew up in Brisbane.
Right.
So okay. I like the climate. I like I like that cohort. I like that spirituality. It does. I think it's my tribe. My tribe are there.
Yeah.
I've just got to bring my husband along.
Hey, just have a really good wine cellar and stock it really well.
In Queensland, that's going to be really tough.
Like deep underground, but also flood proof.
Yeah.
So now, okay, you're right. That is tough. Yeah, up in Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not easy. Not easy. Well, I hope that tonight has been helpful for everyone watching. It's not been a political night. We've touched on politics very briefly, but that wasn't the focus tonight. There's a very simple reality that a lot of us are facing some very awkward Christmases, more so than we have in the past. And finding a way to still be able to get along with people in our life that we have very deep and fundamental disagreements with, and how to bounce back ourselves from the reality of yourself. You've had to reinvent yourself multiple times. There are a lot of people faced with this challenge of reinventing themselves now. The business they built is gone or is suffering. Yeah. The career they were working in, they can't work in anymore. There's a lot of people facing the same sorts of moments that you've faced in very different contexts, but that you've faced over the decades. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off, before we call it a night?
I think I would use the opportunity to reflect on what it is that really gives you fulfillment in life. And is there something you could do if the environment has forced this position on you, then take the power back and think about it, what it is that gives you the greatest joy.
Yeah.
And is there a way that you can translate that into some sort of commercial venture where you can live life on your own terms? If you choose not to be vaccinated and go for power, and for some reason that means that you're exited that industry, think about what you can do. Because we've got to make a living, right?
Yeah.
So is there a way that you can honor that part of you and be true?
Yeah.
I think, and sometimes that just takes some time out. My biggest thing is just taking time.
Well, 3 months for you, I think that's a really important thing, that moment where you took 3 months to really reinvent yourself and figure out what you wanted to do.
And I made basically a contract with my husband to have no mobile phone number for 3 months.
Yeah, right.
So that was otherwise they would get distracted.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
So I had somebody else that kept me accountable to that. And because if I had clear air,
you can make a better decision.
I can make a better decision.
Yeah. Well, that reflects actually very closely what my wife and I did when I stepped back and became a stay-at-home dad, where we made a deal that I had been working for some time on the go-karting business plan. And what was it? Was it 6 months? Yeah. We decided on 6 months of me being a full-time stay-at-home dad, not bringing any money into the family at all, to work on the business plan and to find my first investor. And if I could find my first investor in 6 months, then we would just go for it. And we would stick out whatever that led to, we would stick that out. If I couldn't,
5.5 years later.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I had my first investor within that 6 month window. And so that we then said, okay, we're doing this. And 5.5 years later, we got through council, we got through VCAT, and then we ran headlong into COVID. And now we're hopefully finally getting under construction next month is the current plan. But that's a
lesson in sticking to your lane, right?
Well,
and not being distracted.
And just keeping on plodding away against all odds sometimes. Well, look, I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I've certainly enjoyed debriefing with Therese. This is the slow chat format was born out of how I relax. I relax with a cigar and a good conversation. Yes, babe.
I'd like to know, because you've asked so many questions of Therese, perhaps she has a whole bunch of questions that she's just like, tell me stuff, Topher.
Oh, okay. Well, that's throwing you in the deep end, isn't it?
Yes, so I think there's a couple of questions here. So, Topher, you're quite controversial. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So I think I would love this question to you is, so how are you at peace with that? Because you would have as many haters as supporters.
Oh, probably.
So how do you wash over that? And do you wash over everything, or are there moments where it hurts?
Oh, there are definitely moments where it hurts. I had this epiphany, and I almost mentioned it earlier in the chat, but the conversation kind of moved on. I had this epiphany, I don't know, a couple of years ago now, that it's not possible to say anything on the internet without someone hating you for it. And the example that I use is I could post on the internet, I like kittens. Now, you would think that would be the most inoffensive. Everyone would surely agree we all like kittens. If enough people saw that comment, it would only be a matter of time before someone comes out and says, you shouldn't be owning animals. You can't treat animals like that. Oh, don't you know how the mothers are treated? They're trying to pump out all these kittens for profit, etc. Someone is going to turn around and hate me because I posted and said, I like kittens. And what that did for me was it reframed the attacks when they came against me. Once I accepted that absolutely everything I say, no matter what it is, someone is going to hate me for, then when someone comes out of the woodwork going, oh, I hate you, instead of going, oh no, someone hates me, you go, oh, there you are. I knew you were out there. I knew someone was going to hate me for it. But now you've attacked me, and all you've done is let me know where you are. I already knew you were out there, but now I know where you are. And that really reframed it quite significantly for me. A couple of other things along the way have really helped to kind of help me to toughen up. One is a realization that there are people who went to their graves, they grew old and they died of old age, believing that Hitler was right. Okay? There are people who died believing that Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward was the right thing to do for the country, ignoring the fact that 80 million people died of starvation. There are people that go to their grave believing all kinds of things that are incorrect. And I'm not the idiot whisperer. I can't change their minds. I can't save people from being wrong.
Your dad's lesson, right?
My dad's lesson, exactly.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to like me, and I'm not going to. And this is where the relationship triage comes from. To say, well, I'm not going to pour resources into trying to change the minds of people who are cemented in their view that I'm wrong and are never going to change their minds. I mean, my wife and I spent time in Caracas in Venezuela, and one of the really striking things is you're there in a city where people are lining up for hours waiting for a loaf of bread. It's like it's Soviet-style bread lines. But you talk to people, and there are many people who genuinely believe that Hugo Chavez and socialism was the greatest thing that happened to their country. And they will die on that hill. And I'm never going to change their mind. And once you kind of, I don't know, for me, once I kind of came to terms with that, I'm not the idiot whisperer. No matter what I say, someone's going to hate me for it. And people are going to go to their grave being wrong. I don't know. I just became much more okay with someone coming out with an attack and going, yeah, okay.
Do you think you always had that?
No. Oh, no. I had my dad's disease for a long time. I was a people pleaser.
I like that, dad's disease.
Yeah, and it actually, in hindsight, it made me really insufferable. Now, there's plenty of people who think I'm insufferable now. But
me too.
What, you're one of the people that think I'm insufferable? Or no. When you're trying so hard, like I've always been confident in what I believed in. I haven't always been right, but I've always had confidence because I tend to do my research and I tend to at least know a little bit about what I'm on about. I'm not always right, but I've always had confidence in what I believed in. But the difference was back then I felt the need to try and persuade people. I felt the need, surely we can all get along, but which was my dad's disease. But I'd added that layer of surely if we just talk about this long enough, everyone will realize the sense in what I'm saying. And it made me absolutely insufferable. My wife's nodding her head in the background. I was trying to convince people of things. And in a very real sense, and this might sound funny coming from someone that spends their time, putting things out on the internet and talking about politics and trying to convince people of things, I'm no longer invested in whether or not people actually like me or even necessarily agree with me. One of the striking things about this slow chat format, I get people complain about the smoking or complain about the guests or complain about how long, how slow it is or whatever it is. And I haven't had to say it tonight because we haven't had as many trolls as normal. But I do remind my viewers on a semi-regular basis, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me, right? I'm not here for you. I'm here to enjoy myself. If you see value in it, stick around. If you don't, go do something else, right? It really is genuinely no skin off my nose. And that was a long evolution for me to get to the point where yes, I'm still confident in what I believe. I've certainly changed. I used to be a cookie cutter conservative. I'm now a libertarian. That is a radical shift. If you understand what true conservatism is, that's a radical shift. I have been wrong about a lot of things in the past. I'm sure in time I'll realize that I'm wrong about things now, but I no longer feel the need that everyone has to agree with me. When
did you have the revelation?
That was a slow one. That wasn't something when that wasn't like an epiphany.
Okay.
That was just that's a little bit like what you said before, where you realize in hindsight, the thing that you're proud of is that you had that impact on the industry. It's something that I kind of recognized after it had happened and kind of went, okay, that's who I am now. When did that happen? I'm not sure exactly, but it happened over a period of years.
So my son, Topher, in this acceptance of rejection, that it's just a path, yeah? So my son was maybe 12, maybe 10, I don't know. And he got really invested in endangered species.
Yep, okay.
And he had this idea to save money for a snow leopard.
Yeah, right, okay.
And he went round the suburbs and door knocked and said, I'm just going to go and ask people to just donate to this like shabby money box that I've created. And he went round the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And he came back and he kicked the door open. He was like super excited because he had this thing chock-a-block full of.
Yeah, wow.
And I went, so how was that? And he walked me through his journey.
Yeah.
Which was rejection. Here's $10.
Yeah.
Rejection. Here's $2. Rejection. So more rejections than acceptance. Now I would have freaking given up at my first rejection.
Yeah.
But he had almost that Jerry Harvey sense of, for every no, it brings me closer to a yes.
Yeah.
So at 10 or 11, he had he just naturally has developed that sense of resilience. And some months later, he went out, he had a mate over, and they were then raising money for the corroboratory frog.
Oh, yes.
And so they both went out. So two boys, we're bored. What are we going to do? So Cooper goes, I know, let's go and door knock and raise money to protect the corroboratory frog.
That it becomes
whatever frog that is.
Time.
Yeah. And they, so two boys go out 2 hours later. Yes, they're gone forever.
Goodness.
One, and by this stage, father of second boy is at my kitchen bench, having coffee. He's in IT, Neil.
Yeah.
And I said, they've gone out to collect for the corroboratory frog. They should be back soon. I'll make you a cup of tea. And they come back. And so two boys come back. So one bursts through the door, kicking in the door, like super excited. And then one comes back later, like eyes downcast, going, that was the most excruciating experience of my life.
Oh, no.
And his father said, you can see which child has got parents in sales.
Yes.
And which child has got parents in IT.
Yeah.
But that sense of, so two boys faced with the same experience, one is dejected as hell, like it's probably still causing him damage today.
Yeah.
And then one boy that goes, woo, we got like $112.
Yeah. We got rejected by 1,000
We got
people.
1,000. We got rejected, but that was okay.
Yeah, look, it is an interesting thing. I can remember way back in the day, the 40-hour famine, and I used to door knock for that. And look, my neighbourhood was quite gracious, and I'm sure I probably every fourth door I knocked on, they gave me something. They'd give me a 50-cent coin, or just something, so that I didn't, so that I got something from them. But it is interesting. My dad was in sales before he got into as a minister of religion. Sales has always been something I've been fairly comfortable with, and I hadn't really thought about the being comfortable with rejection aspect of sales. But as I think about going back to the go-karting business and that 6 months, so I'm building my business plan, and I had to pitch it to people who I thought might invest. So I had to find the right people, because I don't have them in my life. I'm not surrounded by millionaires and investors and everything. I don't. Off the top of my head back then, I didn't know a single one. So I built the business plan to the point where I felt like it was ready. And I had one piece of advice ringing in the back of my mind. And that was, someone had said to me once, if you ask for money, you will get advice. But if you ask for advice, you might get money. So what I did was I held these meetings on the premise of, I have a business plan and an idea that I want to pursue. Break my idea for me. Tell me what's wrong with it. Would you meet with me for the purpose of telling me what's wrong with my business plan? And I had the first meeting and he told me what was wrong with my business plan in no uncertain terms, and lovely and specific things that I could go out and fix, right? There's not enough information here. This is actually an assumption. I know you think this is a fact. That's an assumption. Where's the substantiation for that? Okay, great. There's a lot wrong with my business plan. I went away and did a bunch more work. I managed to find, through friend of a contact of someone's, dog's neighbor's postman that got bitten one time, find another person I can pitch to. Same premise. Hey, will you meet with me? Will you please break my business plan? And second time, they broke my business plan. Third time, fourth time. I believe it was my 14th meeting. Same premise. Went to them and said, will you break my business plan for me? And he sat down and he broke my business plan. And then at the end, he sat back and he said, okay, when do we start? Even having identified issues with it still, he by then could see the potential in it. And by then it was 180 pages thick. And it was this absolute monster of a document that had consumed enormous hours of my life. And it was only then, after 13 no's, that I finally, and it was a qualified yes. It wasn't an outright. It was a yes if you do these things and fix these things and show me these things.
So that would break most people, right? And I think that's the difference between having an idea and actually bring it to fruition, right? So who has the patience and the resilience, to see it through to the bitter end? Only a true believer, Topher. Only a true believer. So actually, you're the true believer, and you're inspiring and igniting that passion in others.
With drive.
And that's what Cooper did with the donation as an 11-year-old. He was really passionate about protecting the frog, which he doesn't care about today. At the time, he was very passionate.
If I had a genuinely passionate 11-year-old who actually knew at least a little bit about what he was on about, show up on my doorstep, I would end up giving them something just to encourage them. I don't care about whatever tree frog, whatever. But that person and that passion and that drive deserves respect and deserves encouragement. That's a good trait for someone to have. So yeah.
I also think you're an asshole. All those people that swore at him, like he's 11. Yeah.
Goodness.
May have been a dodgy sort of setup, but his heart was in the right place. The money all went to the animals.
It did it? It actually went.
And he did another one, Topher, where they did a jelly bean. So this is my children. So do they get a sense of entrepreneurship from their mother? So my daughter she was like maybe 8 at the time. She's 18 today.
Yeah. Today?
18 today.
Turned 18 today?
No.
Okay, right. Okay.
But
I was going to say,
so my mother was, my husband and I were in Sydney. My mother-in-law, my mother, flew down from Queensland to look after said children. What could be easier? 11-year-old. Yeah. So 9-year-old goes, my mum wakes up and goes, they've scattered like rats. And my daughter has set up a car washing business.
Oh, goodness.
In the front yard with a little bit of a sign. And they did 2 cars, and she went, this is like awfully hard.
Yes, it is.
Instead, we'd rather repurpose the mix and wash animals. So then they wash pets.
That's not hard? Goodness.
Some people said, is it hypoallergenic? And she went, yeah. What's hypoallergenic? So using the same sponge and suds that we wash cars, we were now washing pets. So she made like $20.
Yeah.
My son then convinced her that we could turn that $20 into something better. Let's just cycle down the shops. My mum has no idea where anyone's at. Yeah. They're here now. They've gone. Where are they gone? They go and they invest the $20 on some jelly beans and a receptacle in which to put jelly beans to then go around and do a fundraising thing around the neighborhood for children's cancer.
Okay.
And this all happens on my mum's watch.
Right.
So now we've done all this, we've come back and we're now going to go around and you sell guesses into how many jelly beans are in the thing. Half the money is going to go to children's cancer.
Yeah. And the other half into their pockets.
Well, they were silent about the other half.
How much did they raise?
About $150.
So they even at half.
And then apparently, so within the guessing, so my son's best mate that he goes to school with funnily enough, had the exact right number on the guess.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So we said, no,
odds?
Duncan won't be winning. We will go to the person that got the next closest number.
That's classic.
Yes. And we made them donate all the money to children's cancer.
Okay.
Which I thought was very unfair.
Yeah,
because there should be a bit of an
Terribly.
entrepreneur's commission, which apparently should have been 50%.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, 50% is still better than most charities are in terms of how much money
That's
finds
right,
its way
it's
through
delivered.
to the actual need. Operating expenses, says James, 100%. You've actually reminded me of a story from when I believe I was 12. I wasn't old enough to become an actual paper boy yet, which really annoyed me. But I could get a job delivering the local leader newspaper.
Yes.
I was old enough to do that. And so I signed up and I got the newspapers on the front doorstep. I fold them up and put them in my crate on the front of my BMX and ride around my route and stick them all in there, the letterboxes. But there was this guy that I knew who sat in the morning. He had a proper paperboy job. Like he was a real.
He was a real one. He had like a hat
in the morning,
and
like 4:30 in the morning, not this afternoon run thing. And he's out there, and he was actually throwing the newspapers rolled up in plastic onto people's porches and into people's front yards, and that was cool. That was so much cooler than trying to stuff them into people's letterboxes, right? And so I had this thought of, I really want to be throwing these and not stuffing them into letterboxes. And so I don't know what possessed me to do this. And this, I think, is the first time I ever did anything like this. And there's a few examples. I'll just touch on this one. I thought, okay, I need these to be wrapped in plastic, but it's got to be like the leading newspaper has to decide. I can't just do it myself, right? So I need the leading newspaper to change how they want their newspapers delivered.
You need
but
to influence
the plastic
them.
sleeve costs money. But what if the plastic sleeve had printing on it that was advertising? And that becomes the very first thing that people see when they grab the newspaper is whatever is on this plastic sleeve. Like that's prime advertising real estate that I've just invented out of nowhere, because there's still the front page. Once it's still everything else is still there, but now there's this new real estate. I rang around. I got quotes on making the sleeves. I got quotes on the printing. Here's me on the phone in my mum's bedroom, because this is back in landline phone days. There's no mobile phones. At 12, getting quotes, writing down all the numbers, figuring it all out, developing a cost per newspaper for the plastic sleeves, and then a revenue. And I showed that it was profitable. And then I wrote up a letter. And one of the things that my dad did for me, there's two key things my dad did for me as a youngster that I'm truly grateful for. One is correcting my pronunciation when I was starting to talk like an Australian. He was always very particular about me speaking correctly. I didn't appreciate it.
Which is why he's got a voice for this. Yeah,
I didn't appreciate it at the
I've got
time.
this Queensland drawl.
Yes, someone did make a comment earlier that every time you say the word "yeah," we can tell that your heart is in Queensland. I was hovering over it to bring it up on the screen, but the moment was never quite right. So I wrote a letter. The second thing my dad did for me was he encouraged me always to do whatever crazy thing was in my head. And then I would have to write the letter first, and then he would edit it and fix it up. And I would have to sit there and go through this excruciating process that I did not appreciate at the time, of my dad explaining to me why my opening paragraph actually needed to be in the middle. And this other statement over here is actually what I should have led with, and and restructuring my letter using still mostly my words, but actually kind of making it work and making it flow. So I sent off this 2-page letter to lead a newspaper with all my numbers and everything in it. And I got this very gracious reply where they actually said, look, thank you so much. You clearly put a lot of work into this. We won't be making that change, but we would like to invite you to come to the headquarters and see how newspapers get printed and blah, 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 blah. And so I did. They paid for a taxi. I got driven to there. I saw all the printing machines. I met not the CEO, but one of the other sort of C-suite people, sort of showed me around for about 45 minutes and then sent me home again with a goodie bag and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'd completely forgotten that story until you mentioned the jelly bean thing.
So be bold, people. That's the message, yeah? Well, be bold, because you never know where it takes you. Yeah?
Obviously, nothing came out of that, but there was something in my brain, even back then, that was ticking away in business and wanting to I don't know, throw newspapers.
You were influencing up. That's what you were doing. Yes, this is the new thing. Yeah,
yeah, that's true. And this is what you say.
My children are going to, your children are going to enter the workforce. Yeah, they will influence up. That's how we make the world a better place, people.
Very good.
So what other questions do you have? You said you had a few.
So for those that can't hear, because my wife is behind the camera, my wife is currently encouraging Therese to ask as many difficult and awkward questions as she possibly can.
So this is a question I want to go to, because I've known Topher I've known Topher's wife, Edwina,
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
So not long before you met Topher. Okay, so what I would be.
Well, no,
I've never asked. I've never known.
We knew each other long before we got married.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was Topher was not a romantic partner of yours when I met you?
No.
Okay. He was insufferable. He's less insufferable today. He's still insufferable.
Depends who you ask.
But less so.
Depends who you ask.
I've got black teeth. But what I would love to know, and I reckon everybody would love to know, so how did this become a romantic relationship?
Oh goodness.
And then why the marriage proposal?
Oh.
And can I tell you, when they got married, there was a competition running.
There was,
and the winner, it was like a trip to Queenstown? No? Somewhere?
Okay, this is not the competition that I...
Okay, but you guys did it on your freaking wedding day. You did a video.
No. Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, that was a by choice one.
Yes.
There was a different... Yes. That's right. And yes, I'm sorry.
And I
That's
went,
right.
got married?
Okay.
What?
All right. So there's a lot of gaps there to fill in. Now, thankfully, my wife's too far away from the microphone, so she can't correct me when I get things wrong. We met at church. We both went to the same Bible study group. We didn't particularly like each other.
So for years and years, yeah?
For 6 years before we actually started going out. We'd already known each other for 6 years. Her hair was too short. There was no way I was interested in her. She'd cut her hair too short. Sorry, Therese. It's a rule. It's a thing of mine. And I wasn't in any way attractive to her either, just to be clear. I was deep in my insufferable stage. So what we did, though, was we became sparring partners because, Bible study group, you read a section of the Bible, you talk about it. Everyone's too passive, too lame. And so... imagine you two. Yes. Okay. I would say one thing, and then just for shits and giggles, Edwina would disagree, or vice versa. And we would just start an argument for the sake of it. Because just to spice things up, because we were both kind of bored. Oh, the way that you hit that boy that you really like. Yeah. So we both moved on from that church, didn't talk for quite some time, but we were friends on Facebook. So actually, it's all Facebook's fault. And then one night, actually, Edwina had just met with her very first mortgage broking client. It was in the city near where I lived. I lived in Fitzroy at the time, and posted on Facebook, "Hey, is anyone free for a drink?" And I went, "Okay, yeah, you know what? Sure." So we went to Kent Street, which is strangely on Smith Street, which has always confused me. Why is there a place called Kent Street on Smith Street? And we had mulled wine. First time I'd ever had mulled wine. Edwina probably had a little bit too much of it, and ended up posting a photograph of the two of us on Facebook, talking about what a great night she'd had. And I thought, and her hair had grown longer by then, so she was within the acceptable. I've never known her to have within the acceptable hair length range. So. Wasn't that sure it was yeah. So then Edwina went on to invite me to invite some mutual friends of ours. There was another couple that we both knew from that church where we'd met. And she said, "Oh, how about you come over to my new apartment, which is in Dandenong, and we'll have dinner and invite this other couple over, and it'll be a great social night." Well, I just accidentally forgot to invite the other couple. Did you? It just purely accidental. So I showed up on my own, and she said, "Oh, where's these other two?" Oh no, I didn't invite them. So we had a lovely night, and where the relationship, I guess, officially started was actually on the next door neighbor's gay couple's couch, which is a story in itself. Next door to Eddie, there was a gay couple that lived there. We got invited over for drinks, and yeah, that would be. So this time you're still mates. You're still friends. Well, we weren't by the end of that night. No. Right. Okay. So then we started dating unofficially because we had a lot of mutual friends. We didn't want people to know, because then if we decided it wasn't working and you go your separate ways, sometimes you're okay, but your friends feel really weird and awkward. They've got a choose team and a certain or team. So, so we kept it on the down low for about 3 months, and then finally showed up together at another friend's housewarming. Actually, the housewarming of the couple that I was supposed to have invited to Eddie's for dinner. They moved into a new house. We showed up together at that housewarming, and then officially the relationship began. I planned to propose at some point. Keep in mind, we'd known each other for 6 years, so we'd only been going out for 3 months. Yeah. But we had, we'd spent a bit of time around each other. And, going out for 6 months. Officially, as far as everyone knew, only 3 months. But then I realized that Valentine's Day was coming up. And Edwina is not at all romantic. And Valentine's Day is not her favorite day of the year. She's practically perfect in every way. She's a very practical person. Yes, she is practically perfect. And so I thought nothing would be more hilarious to me than proposing on Valentine's Day. I mean, it was set up. How could I say no? So what I did, Eddie and I both love cars. One of the ways that we used to hang out with other friends previously was watching the Formula One. We'd go to friends' houses and watch the Formula One. We both like cars. So I set up a fake client for Edwina, keeping in mind she was a brand new mortgage broker. Every client was super exciting. I had some mutual friends of ours set up a fake client that didn't really exist. But what I needed was to know that Edwina was going to walk out of her apartment building to walk down to the coffee shop where she had this meeting, all ready for the day, right, at a certain time. And I was waiting out the front with a Mercedes that I had rented for the day, a Mercedes CLK 55 AMG, for those who really want to know. And she walked out the front door, and there was me, 3-piece suit, rose, the whole works. Like I went way over the top. It was like I was deliberately making this as painful as I possibly could for her. And she saw me, and I saw the thought process in her head of, what's he doing here? I have to go and meet a client. Oh, wait a minute. He set me up. And I watched the facial expressions change. And if looks could kill, I would have died that day. The daggers that I got that day, I have thankfully never seen since. What I did was I hid on the other side of the car, and I threw the keys from a safe distance and told her that she was the one who was going to be driving this lovely CLK AMG 55. And that was enough. That was enough of a peace offering that she settled down a little bit. I had also organized that day to go to Zagami's and do a test drive of Maserati Gran Turismo, because Maserati was her favorite car. Funnily enough, she hated the car. She really didn't like it at all. But I couldn't afford to rent one for the day, but I could organize for a test drive. So I played her personal assistant. So she became Miss Dixon, and I took off the vest from the suit and became business. And we showed up in the Mercedes, and she walked in, and they were all, the receptionist was all very attentive, because this was Miss Dixon, recently returned from from Dubai, which was true. I never lied. I never said a single thing that was untrue. And she was looking for a new car, also true, not in that price range, but that question was never asked. They never asked me what a price range was. And so she got to drive this car with one of the worst salespeople. Talking about good salespeople, this was one of the worst salespeople I've ever come across. It became hilariously painful. It was as though he had never interacted with a female before, and he was just absurdly nervous about the whole thing. He was probably, I don't know, in his 50s. He should have known better. He should have had some skill. But literally, we're driving along. I'm in the back seat, perched up on these little seats that I have in the back of those cars with the roof down, my hair getting ripped off. And he would sit there in silence and then just blurt out some random fact. Oh, it takes 14 cows to supply all the leather for the interior. And then he'd go back to being silent again. So it was just this surreal experience.
You remember?
It was so just surreal. And
were you driving along and you just look across, you're like, what?
And Edwina did not make his life any easier either. She was laying it on thick, as was I. And we finished. And then I couldn't get into Vue de Monde, because by the time I made the decision that I wanted to propose on Valentine's Day, they had a waiting list of hundreds of people. But we went to Cafe Heidi, which actually had the same head chef as Vue de Monde. So I tracked that down, and I took her there, and I proposed at the Heidi Gallery. Yeah, and I proposed, and what I did was I knew better than to buy a ring that Eddie hadn't approved. Right? No. Big mistake. Not going to do that. So what I did was I bought a mirror ball about that big on foam with all pieces of mirror, and I bought a plastic ring, and I ripped off a few pieces of mirror, and I glued this plastic ring onto the bottom of the mirror ball. So I proposed, and I presented her with this ridiculously oversized mirror ball ring as the proposal ring. And yes, I asked her if she would marry me, and there I am on one knee, and she says, I don't know. I need to think about it. And she put me through about 20 minutes of misery in return for the misery that I had inflicted on her that day before she finally said yes. So yeah, that's the story of
Have you been in love before? Had you been in love before?
I would say I had, yeah.
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 Had you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd each had at least one serious relationship prior that obviously in both cases broke up. But yeah, I would say I'd genuinely been in love before. Yeah. And then sort of watch that fall apart and have to deal with all of the fallout of that and the learnings from that and all that.
What was it about Eddie? So you would have been very mindful. Because not long after, so you fall in love with her. You get engaged and married very quickly.
Yeah, well, we then got married only 6 months after.
What was why? What was the thing?
Why, babe? Why?
So I remind you again, we'd known each other for 6 years before we started going out. By the time we got married, we'd known each other for 7 years. And at various times over those 7 years, we'd seen each other a fair bit for various reasons, whether social or through the church or then dating and so forth. So we had spent a fair bit of time around each other. What was really different for me, the person that I'd previously been in love with, the day-to-day of being around them was great, but they were pulling in a completely different direction in terms of who they were, what they wanted out of life, what they thought was important. And so, yes, meeting up with them on Brunswick Street and having a coffee and then going salsa dancing, because I was a dancer and so was she, that's how we met, was great. It was amazing. It was fantastic. But then we'd sit and have a serious conversation and very quickly run into these really fundamental differences in what we wanted out of life. And the relationship went for over a year, but ultimately there was just a mutual recognition that we are two very different people and we want two very, very different things out of life. And we went our separate ways. What was really striking about the time that I spent with Eddie was actually we really wanted the same things. We're both entrepreneurial. We're willing to take a risk in the pursuit of a bigger dream. We both wanted a family, although the size of that family was different between us, but we both wanted a family. We're both committed to our faith. Which is important to have that alignment there. And so there was just this real kind of alignment of this is actually someone that I can team up with, and actually in the bigger scheme of things, we're pulling in the same direction and we're trying to get to the same place. And as a team, I think we can do that really well. You want to add to that? Do you need the microphone for a right of reply?
No, that's probably pretty accurate.
That's a fair assessment, you reckon? There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Mark it in your calendar. I said something and my wife didn't disagree with me. That's amazing. So yeah, that's the answer to that.
I'd also say that has also been pretty important, even during all this, over the last couple of years, because we'd already established that. You're
going to need a chair and come over here because this mic isn't going to be able to hear you. Can you guys hear Edwina when she speaks from behind the mic? I'd be curious to know. And Beth says, best interview ever. Well, thank you.
Oh, really?
That's probably being a little bit kind, but thank you. Clearly, it should be Therese asking the questions at all times.
So my son says that he's turning 20.
Yep.
That, which is, I think, quite insightful. I think he said this 5 years ago, that when there's no, that I'm aware of, Cooper, if you're listening, Gabby, maybe it's you, that he wants to reserve his right to fall in love until perhaps later in life.
Okay.
Because two things happen when you fall in love for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You either marry and they become your life partner, or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't know that he wants to go through the trauma of plan B. Yeah. And so he chooses to reserve his right. My daughter, 18, and she's got a lovely boyfriend. They're very committed and in love, but she's like he's like her fifth relationship. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Seventh, if there's probably some others that I don't know about. And I think that's interesting about the you two. Yeah. I've been I married my husband, just for the people here.
Yeah.
I married my husband 6 years ago. I proposed.
Okay.
He accepted.
Yep.
After saying, why? Yeah. And to which I said, it's my 50th and I'll do what I like. Yeah.
So did you
and I want to get married.
Wow.
To you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And you two were, of course, there.
Yes, we were. Yeah.
You were there at that wedding.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And has it been smooth sailing? Hell no. But even Topher getting married 6 years ago after being together for 20 years, and Eddie and Topher know this, but you don't because you're the audience. Our son was 14 at the time. So he gave his dad away.
Oh, nice. Yes, I remember that.
And our daughter, who was 12, was our wedding singer. And the wedding was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you have to write vows, when you've been together for 20 years, that's a very cathartic experience. The reason I wanted to get married, apart from being 50th and it being a social media phenomenon, was we had never been married. We'd never christened children or had any sense of ceremony.
Yeah, okay.
What I wanted before I died was an audience to let people know how much my life partner meant to me. When you write vows after 20 years together, it's a very different vow writing ceremony.
Yeah, okay.
Because you are not writing vows about hope.
Yeah.
We've been together for 20 years. Yeah, you've been a fucking asshole at times, and probably I have been too. Yeah.
Under the covers one more time, I swear I will strangle you in your
sleep. Fuck you. Yeah. So together after 20 years, you need to reflect on very different things. And that was a wonderful experience. Can I tell anybody? So if you get married within a few months, that's wonderful. And I've never been the thing about renew your vows, because everybody, like when Heidi Klum and Seal reviewed their vows and they got divorced and like everybody, that happened. Yeah. But there's something marvelous about celebrating love for 20 years. It's not a new love. There's no fucking surprises here, yeah? And so it was quite a cathartic exercise. Yeah. And I had to reflect back on, I married somebody who I always said, if I was a man, he would be the man that I'd like to be because he has courage and because he is true to himself. Do we agree on things? Not a lot. And not a lot in parenting. But we respect each other's values, and I think that's what gets us through.
And would you say that despite all the differences on many things, you are pulling in the same direction? Is that a
who else would fucking put up with me? Like, seriously. And we had this conversation today about, and he said, I think social media is just trite and I find it just,
That's fair. Yeah.
But you love it. Yeah. You were born for this. I get that, that this is something that sort of works for you. He's always not necessarily in agreement, but supportive. And Topher, he's let me travel the world on my own. He has let me travel overseas. I've risked and dared and lost and won, and he's been behind me the whole way.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing that we didn't sort of touch on. When you had some of these real challenges and body blows to your business or challenges with children and growing up and their own health, he's been there the whole time. Not every husband and not every wife has stuck through that and continued to be there.
That's because I'm charming.
Must be.
So it's fun. No, like deadly serious. Marriage takes work, like a partnership or relationship. It takes work. So, and oftentimes that means leaving your ego to one side.
Very true. All right, babe, do you want to hijack my conversation any further or are we calling it a night? If you want to do more, you're going to have to get your own device and dial in so I can put you on the screen. People are saying, who's this other person? Why can't we see her?
She's the mastermind behind it all.
Yes, well, that's actually, metaphorically, this is really quite appropriate.
They didn't hear.
No.
Are there other questions that you would want to ask Topher? Because you have seen him for a long time and you have seen him talk about water, but then also just blow up into all of this political stuff that had that. Do you have any questions around that?
Don't know that, but there is a question that I did put on pause from before.
Yeah. Sure.
And this is about, because this is very real to a lot of people that are probably perhaps listening. So you homeschooling,
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that would be listening that have been homeschooling. Yeah.
Okay.
And hate it more than life itself.
Oh, yeah. See,
hate it more than life itself. Now, to be fair, they didn't sign up to homeschooling.
Yeah.
This was just imposed on them.
Yeah.
And schools had to like very quickly cobble up something. So Topher, there would be so many people out there going, man, no way homeschooling. But you,
I can understand why.
You were homeschooled.
Yeah.
You are homeschooling Winston, and he's an incredible.
We shouldn't be in school yet.
Yeah, he can practically read already. He's great with his numbers. He's doing addition and subtraction. He's getting there with multiplication.
So how do you? Because so like.
Yeah. So the first answer.
I couldn't think of anything worse myself.
The first answer to that question is being forced to do school on the school schedule at your house is not homeschooling.
Correct. Okay? Yeah. Okay.
It literally takes away the number one upside of homeschooling, which is that you determine the schedule and that you make it fit your life. Right. And you can't do that when you're on the school schedule, when they have to be in front of the computer from here to there at these times and check in and all that kind of absolute nonsense. So the key upside of homeschooling is that it allows you a flexibility in how you live that you cannot get when you are running to a school schedule. And that's true whether they're in your home or whether you've got drop off and pick up times. Okay. I can't think of anything worse than having to make my kid, who's 5 now, but even fast forward a few years, he's 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, sit in front of a computer at the designated times at home when I'm the one who's got to make sure he's there and doing the right things and everything else. I can't think of anything worse. And that is not homeschooling. So homeschooling, I was homeschooled. We went through a real evolution. When we started, what we were essentially trying to do was replicate the school system at home, which was a mistake. And we learned that very quickly, but that's how we started.
When you say very quickly, so learned that within a year?
Oh, no, a couple of years.
Okay.
3 years.
Okay.
So we had English textbooks and chemistry and science and history and and the big struggle was, where do we get the best textbooks from? My parents and my mum especially invested enormous amounts of time researching and finding the best textbooks, because that's what it was about. It was, school is about textbooks and tests. Homeschooling must be about textbooks and tests, right?
Industrial complex, yeah.
And so they tried to bring that home. And so then trying to make a schedule. At this time, you're doing this class. At that time, you're doing that class. Now, that can work for some families. My brother, who homeschools, runs in largely that manner, right? But there's a couple of massive differences. Number one, the speed with which you can get through work is much faster. Think about any 1 hour class.
Well, that's what a lot of parents are saying about homeschooling. Yeah. They go, why am I paying all these exorbitant school fees when it's like 2 hours of learning? Yeah,
correct. Oh, if you're lucky, in one day, 2 hours of learning.
So no disrespect to teachers out there. No, I'm just saying that when you condense it down to a homeschooling environment of transfer classroom to homeschooling, it seems to be all that's has been a big frustration, I think, for parents.
It's not the teachers. It is the system itself is flawed, in my opinion. So number one, the amount of time required for the academic aspects is a fraction of what it is in the classroom, in the schoolroom. But there's a secondary challenge, and that is there's a lot of opportunities that the school offers: team sports, excursions, bringing in tutors or specialists, or doing performances and arts and all sorts of other things that are much harder. Okay, so when I was homeschooling, it was very difficult to do because there wasn't a lot of options. So really, we had to get together with other homeschooling families, but there weren't a lot of homeschooling families. And so once a month, you'd drive for 2 hours to get to somewhere, and people drove for, some of them were driving for 3-4 hours to all get together, and there were 50 kids. Now there can be 30 kids in the local park down here every Tuesday, and that's just sort of a local area, because there's another group a little bit over, another group a little bit over that way, and so forth. There's just a lot more people doing it now. But also, there's a lot more opportunities now. So there are a lot more community sports that are run at a council level, or run by churches, or run by other organizations. Many private schools and Christian schools will allow homeschooled kids to sign up to their sports program, or to their excursions, or to their other things like that. Obviously, you pay, but they're quite happy to have the homeschooled kids become a part of that aspect of the education. But there's also, back then, if you wanted to learn chemistry, you had to either find a VHS chemistry series or find a good textbook and then work through it and go and buy the stuff. Now you jump online and you sign up to a subscription box. And once a month, a box arrives with a bunch of chemistry lessons in it that you can then just sit down and do. So my 5-year-old boy has made a clock run from a battery made out of a lemon, right? He's built he's built a helicopter. He's built a genuine functioning grandfather clock with all of the parts and pieces moving, not by himself. Obviously, that was a joint project between him and I. It took us about 3 days. hung it on the wall. It worked perfectly until the wall mounts weren't strong enough and it fell off and broke, which was unfortunate. But these are things now that you can literally just jump online, find, pay what is often not massive amounts of money compared to school fees and the costs of having a kid in school. These aren't ridiculous amounts of money. And then all of a sudden, you are now schooling on your terms, on your schedule, when it works for you. You can go away whenever you want. No longer do you have to take your holidays at the same time as everybody else, right? Just the money you can save by not having to travel during peak times alone can pay for a fair chunk of your schooling in a given year. And then, of course, we've got people that we know that we can have as babysitters / tutors. It can be a case of, okay, Eddie's going to be busy all day. I've got meetings today. We bring somebody in. They're going to be here for 5 hours. They're going to look after the kids, and along the way, they're going to do these pages of those books. And so it just becomes phenomenally flexible. And for me, I mean, Edwina started as a mortgage broker because she wanted to design her own lifestyle. For me, homeschooling is actually a core part of designing my own lifestyle. I can't think of anything worse than having to get stuck in the school run every morning, trying to drop a kid off to school and then go and pick them up again on a certain schedule. Oh no, my meeting went late. I'm going to be late to pick my kid up. All that, I couldn't do that. For me, the downsides of homeschooling, the work involved in homeschooling is less than the impact of having to fit in with the school's schedule. So homeschooling today has never been easier. It's never been more popular. There are more and more people doing it. There are opportunities absolutely everywhere to do it.
Do you reckon there'll be an uplift in homeschooling going into 2022?
There already is.
There
already is.
As a result
they're
of
seeing unprecedented numbers.
Wow.
Because a lot of people, so let me tell you the story of why we started homeschooling, because that's the experience that a lot of people have had now, is what we had many years ago. My oldest brother, Stephen, I don't know exactly what it was. It was some sort of an infection in his leg. It may have been a staph infection or something. I don't really know what it was or what that is. But for whatever reason, he was told he couldn't go to school for, I believe it was 3 months. So the school started sending work home.
Yes.
Now, my oldest brother, Stephen, was a top 10% student in the primary school that he was going to at the time. And so my parents never had any reason to believe there was anything questionable about his schooling. In addition, my mum had actually studied a few years to become a teacher. And so she was very happy with the school system, would have been a teacher had she not gotten married. And back then, once you're married, you're not, different sort of time, different world.
Different times.
But then Stephen comes home, he's doing a school from home, and they discover that he's getting more than half of his maths questions wrong. He's getting less than 50%, but he's a top 10% student. And so my mum rang the teacher and said, sorry, I thought you said that my son was doing really well. Oh, he's doing really well. He's in the top 10% of the class. He's a really good student. And that was the first indicator to my parents that all was not well with the way that schooling was being done. By the end of 3 months, he was actually getting 95% plus questions correct. And the ones he was getting wrong was usually out of haste rather than actually not understanding. A similar thing happened to me. I was a slow reader. So I did the first three. I did prep grades 1, 2, and 3 in primary school. Yeah. I was classified as a slow reader. And then over 2 weeks, over a 2-week holiday break, my mum invested time in me getting me to read. And within about week 3 of the following term, I was in the advanced reading class. And those two things happened at around about the same time, my oldest brother and myself. And my mum started to put it all together and just go, if I can sit down with my kids for a relatively short period of time and get those kinds of results, what's the school system doing? Homeschooling back then was borderline.
So we're talking 70s, 80s?
No. We're talking mid 80s.
1980s, yeah.
Oh yeah, late 80s by the time I started homeschooling. 80 would have been 89, I think. Mm-hmm. 89, 90. So homeschooling was borderline illegal, and there was a push to make it illegal. It was deeply weird. Yeah. People thought you had multiple heads.
You're a cult.
Yeah.
Would have been probably
School of the Air was a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Where people in remote
that's
regions.
okay though. That's honourable. That farmers.
That's right, and they don't have a school nearby, right? But to live in an urban environment and choose to homeschool, you're freaking weird, right? So I grew up being very comfortable with being weird. So my parents asked me, and my older brother Jonathan, who was 1 year ahead of me, they said, "Listen, if you want to homeschool, you both have to say that you want to homeschool, and then we'll homeschool you both. If either of you says no, I'd rather stay in school, then we'll leave you both in school. It's not a problem." But whatever happened, it was going to happen to both of us, and we both wanted to homeschool, so that's what they did. And like I said, we started off very kind of curriculum driven. We've got to find the right textbooks. You've got to spend a certain amount of time on this, And then as time went on, the pendulum swung almost fully the other way. The bookwork is borderline irrelevant. What actually matters is the life lessons that you're learning. And ultimately, the way I boil it down, this isn't what how my parents boiled it down, but I boil it down now to 3 things. And I've spoken on homeschooling in the past. I boil it down to 3 things. There are 3 skills that every person needs by the time they're, let's say, 13, 14 years old. And if they have those skills at that age, they are basically set up for life, whatever they choose to do. They are words, numbers, and relationships. Right?
Yep.
If you as a 13, 14-year-old are competent with words, competent with numbers, and competent with relationships across different social groups, ages, genders, etc., then you are pretty well set up for life, right? You can then decide you want to be a doctor, and yes, now you need a high school certificate. You got to go to university. You got to go through that process to get that. Great. You can decide you want to be an entrepreneur. You can decide you want to be a singer, an artist. You can decide you want to be a stay-at-home parent. You can make whatever decision you want, but you're likely to be quite well set up for all of those things if you are competent in those 3. And I think it's an absolute travesty that we have a school system now that is actually failing on all 3 of those fronts, in my opinion. We don't have great literacy. We don't have great numeracy. In fact, we're embarrassing compared to the rest of the world. When you look at how much money we spend, our results are embarrassing. And I would argue that a school environment is one of the worst environments to put children in to train them in relationships. Here we've created a world full of their peers where there is this big age gap to them and the teachers and sort of the others. And so there's the us and there's the others. Then all the peer pressure and all the peer groups and all of what goes on there. You know, people used to always ask me, oh, what about socialization? And I developed a number of pat answers to this whole, what about your social development, socialization? And one of them was, well, the same thing that you call social development when someone's in prep, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, that's the exact same thing that you call peer pressure when they're in year 8 and year 9, right? So you spend years going, go and do what all the other kids are doing. And then 5 years later, you're going, don't do what all the other kids are doing. You know, we haven't actually trained children in interacting with the world at large. We've given them one task, go and make all these friends, okay, which is good. It's an important skill. But without context around it, that then becomes a huge problem only a few years later. Now, the kids are doing marijuana or acid or whatever the fashionable thing is now, and breaking and entering and whatever else it might be. I mean, I grew up in a rough part of the world, so maybe that's not normal for everybody, but that was normal in my area, all the high school kids around me. And that very same dynamic of go and do what all the other kids are doing is now a massive problem. When you're homeschooled, and I will add a caveat to this in a moment, I'll finish with a caveat, but when you're homeschooled, done right, you grow up in a very large world. You're interacting with babies, you're interacting with old people, you're interacting with people that your parents are meeting with. You're overhearing conversations. Yes, you have to sit there and have a boring hour and a half while you sit there because your mum's having a coffee with some other person. You've got a colouring book to colour in, and it's a boring hour and a half. But the whole hour and a half, you're hearing this conversation where they're talking about life and they're talking about what's going on for them. You know, we talked about how kids are always watching and always learning. We talked about that earlier in the slide chat. Now, all of a sudden, that gets put on steroids because they're watching and learning from you for all of that time, rather than sitting in a classroom trying to, look good to the other kids whilst trying not to get caught by the teacher. It's an entirely different way of preparing someone for this issue of relationships. Now, the caveat, I've seen homeschooling done well, and I've seen homeschooling done really, really badly. The difference is this: homeschooling, and not homeschooling, schooling, child raising done right is raising them in a big world where they meet a lot of different people from a lot of different demographics in a lot of different life situations, who have a lot of different reasons for doing what they're doing, do a lot of different things, have a lot of different beliefs, etc. That's raising a child done right. Raising a child done wrong is raising a child in a small world. Now, homeschooling done wrong can literally trap a child in the home, right? There's mom, there's dad, there's siblings, and there's basically nobody else. That's homeschooling done horribly wrong. I've seen that done, and the results are not good. But by the same token, I would argue that stratified schooling, where you've got all the kids in their own age groups, is in a way doing that to every kid. You're shrinking their world. There's lots of people in it, but they're all the same. I mean, okay, they're all different, but they're all the same age group. They're all obsessed with the same TV shows. They're all focused on the same things. And that's not a healthy way to raise a child. So to me, homeschooling done right makes your child's world bigger than what it would have been if they were in school. And if you can't do that, you probably shouldn't homeschool. If you can do that, you should probably think about it.
I could not do it.
Seriously. And fair enough.
And I know that,
But I'd also say you've got two very different children as well.
I've got two very different children. And I don't know that the ed system as it is today, it really, and my children hate it, having come through it, but I also hated it, and it's probably a lot better than when I graduated in 1982. But it's still that post-industrial complex, so it doesn't, it favors those. I think life survival skills is about adapting, and so you need to foster confidence to be able to express your point of view. And you won't mention about words, numbers, and relationships. I don't know that they necessarily get that from school. I suppose that now comes to parenting.
But the promise of school was
not the best with babies, but I think I was okay with as they've gotten older. Yeah. And that's okay.
You've also given your kids the opportunity for one to then go, this isn't for me, and the other one to go, this is very much for me.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about that and the personality differences and how you've sort of handled that you talked about your son before and how he's just out there knocking on doors and raising money for causes and all that sort of stuff.
He didn't have the happiest school life though. Because he's a creative, like you. He's a creative. He's very self-expressive. So high school wasn't great for him, but he was very supreme in his. He didn't fit in there. He was very supremely confident in who he was as a man, and today he's a man.
As a person at the time, as a
person,
at the time.
What I see with him naturally he's a gamer. What I observe with him is that he stands for respect. He has no tolerance. He shuts down conversations online where they are victimizing or harming others. I see him shut that down very well, in a way that doesn't
blow it all up.
Nice. Go, hey boys, let's move on from this. So I see that, and I like the way that he's got a zero tolerance for that.
Nice.
Did we teach him that? Did we say, hey, this is going to be a thing about values? No, I like to think that that's something that he picked up subliminally from the way that Jason and I operate. My daughter is also very fiercely for the people. Against injustice. That doesn't come through the school system. And the expression, and I think they've both been penalized through the education system by being a bit contrary. And I think that they would say that there's not a lot of relevance to that schooling gave them. I get, but it does, and I know that, and they do that, and that's very much a teenage thing. But look, they taught you to fucking read and write, so that's something.
But they take.
Is there the critical thought is very subjective, and I have children that are very individual. Which, I mean, surprise, coming from you. I mean, wow, who would have thought? But I would the metric that I would apply is this. Yes, they teach them how to read and write and so forth. The system has them in primary and secondary education. The system has them for 12 years. You would expect a shitload of development in 12 years, right? It's not, you taught them the basics moderately well done you. No, you had them for 12 years and you churned, and again, this is nothing against teachers. In my opinion, it's the system, it's the structure of the system itself that is the problem. You had them for 12 years, and that's the best you could do. I mean, our results on an international scale out of our education system are mediocre at best. And then when you apply the layer of how much money we spend, it's embarrassing, the results that we get for the amount that we actually spend. 12 years, 12 formative years of someone's life. And that amount of money, I just don't see the return on investment here. Now, someone made a comment earlier that they really want one of these self-filling wine glasses.
So someone has noticed.
Very good.
Someone has noticed that that Therese's glass
It's always full.
keeps magically filling itself. I think my wife Edwina is trying to make sure that Therese has to crash on the in the spare bedroom tonight.
She might very well be doing that
rather than driving home. Yes. All right. So, look, I appreciate the questions. These slow chats aren't supposed to be all about me. I talk enough already without being.
That's lots of emojis.
Yes, lots of emojis. So how do we wind up? Do we wind up? Is there more to say? Do you have questions? Do you have questions
Edwina.
for Therese? Well, no, viewers as well. Do you have questions for Therese? Do you have questions for me? This is kind of a kickback. We're not really talking about politics. We're more talking about life in general, life experience, and particularly life skills as they may relate to the challenges coming up with Christmas and so forth, and the new landscape that we find ourselves in, new levels of divisiveness, etc. So if you've got questions for me or for Therese, I'd invite them right now. But I'm also aware that it's 11:15.
Oh, is it?
Yes, we've had good fun.
Good Lord.
So we might not drag this on too much longer. But if there's a few final questions, okay. My wife has stuck her finger in the air.
I have more of a question for Therese, actually.
Yeah.
As people are learning to develop resilience and to be able to stand up for themselves and actually just speak their own minds, because you've worked with so many people and you know a lot of different tools, do you know a particular tool where somebody could actually go, oh, okay, I'm a really anxious person, but I could do this tiny little thing and it would actually help me to slowly build that up over time? Like, I know there are people in America that say, it's the ask for 10% off coffee every time you get coffee. And they might say no, but sometimes they might say yes. But it's just that tiny little practice of
dealing with the rejection and all of that. Yeah.
And just being okay with it.
And being oh, freak, jeez, I wish it was scripted.
She puts people on the spot, doesn't she?
She does.
She's worse than me. People don't believe me. She's worse than me. She's more probing than me.
She is more probing. And it's an excellent question. Shit.
Welcome to Slow Chat Hell.
Absolutely. I probably don't have a good answer to this. What I would say is that I think you just need a few people in your corridor every so often, where somebody where it's a safe place, somebody that you know. And I talk to a lot of people. I always said I work 25 hours a week and I dedicate 5 hours a week to pro bono stuff. So non-paying clients that just want some advice, probably just listen. I would say make sure you've got somebody in your corner that's not a sycophant. Yeah.
Yep.
That will listen. And I think I can give some practical advice around that. So for me, an external perspective can really clear up a lot of stuff. And I've been guilty of the same thing. Yeah. So I have dealt with that. So with my mental health issues, by talking to somebody else and saying, this has happened. Why would they do that? It makes me feel like this. And somebody to say, let me just give you maybe that other person's perspective. They have a busy life. They have 4 children. They have a lot going on in their world. While it would be lovely for them to phone you every week, they've probably got a lot going on. And just sometimes that external perspective is nice, and something that's not going to discount you, to go, I understand, I have felt the same. So my advice would be to find some people that can be in your corner, and people are a lot more generous than you probably think. So
it's true.
They truly are. And then if you get some help, show gratitude. And then you can pick up the phone and ask again.
Got a great question here from someone who says, Ian says, how do you deal with a serious indifference in a relationship? Indifference, I would say, is one of the hardest things to deal with. It's actually harder than if someone doesn't like you.
That's somebody quitting.
Well, it's
indifference to me.
Copping out. And there's two things that spring to mind for me, Ian, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well. Two things that spring to mind. There's a difference between someone who is indifferent towards the relationship but is passionate about other things versus someone who is indifferent across the board. If someone is actually indifferent across the board, then that could be an indication of being close to a depressive type of state, or life has gotten on top of them in some way. It may not actually be personal. It may actually be that they are feeling the weight of whatever it is. And you might be thinking they're indifferent towards you, but maybe just take a step back for a minute and say, do they have things that they're passionate about at all? Are there areas in their life where they're really not indifferent? Because if there's nothing, then they actually might be really close to breaking point, right? And what they would need is actually a lot of support to help them get through to the other side of that. If, on the other hand, someone is indifferent towards you but passionate about other things, that's really, really tricky. The first thing I would be doing is actually sitting down and thinking about and maybe writing a list out of what are the things that they are passionate about and what is the common thread in those things that might explain why those things excite them and capture their attention and they pour their energy into those things. What is it about that? And is there something in the relationship? Is there some, not that you necessarily want to be folding yourself up like a pretzel for somebody else. There's this fine line to walk. Relationships take work on the one hand. On the other hand, you still actually have to be true to who you are and what you believe. And so you've got to find that fine line. But if we're talking about someone who's indifferent in the relationship, but passionate about other things, then I would really be trying to figure out what's the thread, what's the common thread of the things that they are passionate about. And is there perhaps a way that you can bring an element of that into the relationship? Let me do that for you. I'm sorry, I've got it. You answer the. What do you think? How do you deal with a serious?
No, so I think I agree with you. Yes. So if it's indifference across the board, I'm indifferent to you as my partner. I'm indifferent to the children from our relationship. I'm indifferent to everything. I think you're right. It's a red flag for perhaps a depressive episode.
Yeah.
And so have a think about it from their perspective. If they're, as you say, they're selectively indifferent and they're indifferent to you, then you've got some relationship problems, I think.
At that point, yeah. Yeah, you do, absolutely.
And Topher, we've been, my partner, not my husband, I've been together for 26 years, despite being married for only 6. But there have been moments, where we have basically said, fuck you, and I'm out of here, yeah? In our case, we have children as our anchor. So at moments of crises, when we're indifferent, I am over you. I think it's always and extreme moments of stress, it's always come back to those children. My husband his parents divorced, and he was only 4.
Yeah, right.
That is not what he wants.
Yeah, for his kids.
So I'm fortunate that I didn't come from a broken family.
Yeah.
And so you need to come back and center and focus. And that takes some fucking ego letting down, usually, on both parties.
And that's where it gets hard. Puff on that a few times because the heat needs to get drawn in. That's where it gets really hard. If you're really committed to a relationship and the other person just isn't, then I grew up as a pastor's kid. I saw my dad trying to counsel relationships for my entire childhood and young adulthood. And I've seen some real train wrecks. And the real train wrecks are not the ones where they're fighting. The real train wrecks are where one just doesn't care anymore. And if you can't find something to get them to care, then the writing is kind of on the wall at that point. Like it's really, really tough. I wouldn't say give up necessarily, but I'd certainly be thinking about what could reignite a passion in that person.
Is that possible? Can we find something?
Yeah,
can we find something?
But the other thing as well,
before it gets ugly.
Yeah. But the other thing as well, the what we were saying before, in terms of relationships, and you asked me earlier, had I been in love before I fell in love with Edwina, and the answer is yes. Why didn't that work out, and why did I end up marrying Eddie? Well, with that first relationship, we were pulling in very different directions, right? And with Edwina, we are going in the same direction in life. We want the same things in life. And the logic that I went through as I was asking myself, do I want to marry Edwina or not? And the reason why I left the previous relationship was the same logic that arrived at the opposite conclusion, which was in every relationship, the sense of being in love is going to go up and down.
Yes.
Right. It's not there every day. Do you feel like you're in, like, we idolize this feeling of being in love? Well, I'm sorry, it's not sustainable. You'll have it some days, you won't have it other days. It doesn't mean it's gone forever, right? Stick it out. It'll come back for a season. But if you can,
you need something bigger than that.
If you can wake up next to someone, next to your husband, next to your wife, on those days where you're out of love, right? You don't feel that fuzzy feeling, and they're drooling on the pillow and they're snoring and they're doing all the things that we all do in our sleep,
which is very adorable. And in a woman, I have to say, it's just a tip.
And you can look at that person and go, this is the person I'm waking up to for the rest of my life. But you know what? I'm okay with that. And that comes from the bigger picture things, right? That's when you look at that person, you go, this is the mother of my children. This is the person that I'm building a life with. This is the person that I'm going to retire with. And it comes in my mind from that alignment of the bigger picture stuff. And if you've got someone where you're aligned on the bigger picture stuff, then the moments in and out of love just become part of the journey. They don't become a threat to the relationship.
I heard it said once, and I think it was an ABC thing, where somebody asked a couple, they'd been together for 40 years, what's the secret to a long marriage? And he said, we never felt out of love with each other at the same time. Which I think, as long as someone's fighting for the relationship, it's when both give up. Hey.
Yeah. And so I think if you're in a situation where you feel like the other side has given up, I think there's a couple of fundamental questions that need to be asked. And one is, have they given up on everything? In which case, I think they need some investment into them, because they're close to breaking point, and that's what you're there for, right? Through in sickness and in health, good times and bad, that you're meant to be there for them in that phase. If it's selective and they're passionate about other things and they're not passionate about your relationship, I think that's when you probably want to be having a look at the bigger picture things. Are you pulling in the same direction on the bigger picture stuff? Are you actually trying to go the same way in life or not? Because if there's a dramatic misalignment there, then there can come a point where someone goes, well, I'm not investing anymore in this because it's not going to return anything to me, because the things that we're doing together don't align with the things
That's what happened with
want.
my first marriage.
Yeah. So
everyone needs a practice husband. Just another tip. Yeah.
Individual results may vary.
That's right. That's true. We were not aligned. We were not going to fight for the same things.
Yeah. And that's what I'd be looking to next. And if there is a drastic misalignment there, you've then got some really fundamental questions to ask yourself. And I'm never one to advocate giving up on a marriage. I think it's, when you say those vows, you're supposed to mean them. Reality, of course, runs its course and can lead to a different end result. But I think it's always worth fighting for, at least in the first instance. And so I would challenge you to think about the bigger picture things that your partner is committed to, and ask yourself.
Maybe ask the questions first before you married the first practice husband.
Yeah.
Maybe ask those questions. That's a tip.
But if you can find an alignment, and get back to those bigger picture things and find an alignment, then that may be the source of the spark that can actually then bring some mutual commitment back into the relationship. If you can just get aligned on a few of the bigger picture things. But look, you've now scraped the absolute bottom of the barrel of my relationship advice capacity. So that's as deep as I go. Now, all right, we've got a couple of comments here. Okay, so Camp Hill, Creek Hill, I'm happy for this conversation to smash the slow chat record. Well, we're still an hour away from that. I don't know if I've got that in me tonight. I'm sorry. 40 years for us. I've been with him since I was 16, still madly in love. Well done, Bev. That is fantastic.
Bev, you're the same age as me. Lovely.
Deborah says, great night, Topher, listening to you and Therese slow chat. She's funny, and your lovely wife, Edwina. It's good to just listen to interesting conversation other than COVID and politics sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. So Robin's saying, I love my husband. We've always been aligned on the core values. I think that's the thing. That's a resounding theme, right? And the thing is,
there's a success. This is the secret to a long-standing relationship success, because you'll know what my mother-in-law says this too.
In business and
in business.
Yeah,
her husband's about to turn 90. Yeah?
Yeah.
That's a long time together.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, they argue sometimes.
Mm.
And she always said to me, there is something beyond a romantic relationship, and it's a partnership for life.
Yeah. It's actually being a team. You know, it is a cliche. Sorry, I'll bring that back up. That's quite funny. Rebecca Inglis says, "Lol, my practice marriage lasted 21 years." You know, there's this expression which is just one of these awful cliches, but it's also true. It's you and me against the world, right? And and when you can find that person where you can be, it's you and me against the world, then magic kind of happens at that point. And
even John DeBlanc brought in the bubble idea.
Yeah, so we had a marriage counsellor. It was actually Edwina's pastor from some years before we got together, who did some pre-marriage counselling with him, and that's again just about asking the questions.
Yeah.
Actually, let's have these conversations before we get married rather than afterwards, because things can get weird at that point. And one of the things that he really talked about and emphasised very strongly with us was this idea of a bubble, and he said your marriage has to exist inside of its own little special bubble. And yes, even your kids, whilst they're very, very close to you, there is still a unique bubble that you have for your marriage, or need to have, for your marriage. And the problem is that, like a bubble, you blow it out of a little bubble thing and it very quickly starts to evaporate away and erode, and eventually it kind of pops. A bubble takes work to maintain. You've got to keep it going. And what he talked about, and he was an employee for most of his life, so he had this thing called weekends. We're self-employed; we don't have them.
He was a pastor, he didn't have weekends.
Well, yeah. But he would talk about, you know, making sure that you reconnecting on weekends and spending time together, and sort of investing in that bubble that you've got around yourselves, so that it can get through the drudgery of the week and kids and school and job and the boss and clients and everything else, and survive all the way to the following weekend, and you can recharge and reinvest in that bubble at that point. And I think it's a useful analogy. I don't think the whole weekend thing works for self-employed people, but I do think that there is
like your weekend.
Yeah. Or weekends certainly don't work when you're going to protests every weekend. But this idea that you need to build a bubble around yourselves that is sacred to the two of you, and it's your own special relationship and your own special place. And yes, you can go and have beers with the boys. Yes, you can go and have girls' nights. Yes, you can go and enjoy all of those things. But there is something special that is reserved for the two of you, that is invested in by the two of you to
your future. That's invested in your future, together.
And that I think was a good piece of advice that that came out of our pre-marriage counselling. So yeah, I'm just seeing some comments here. Oh dear, yeah. So Matthew Taylor, I love my partner. We've known each other for 28 years. She's got lung and brain cancer. I'm so sorry, mate. That is brutal, as Queen Me and Gary have both said. So very sorry to hear that, mate. I hope that you've got really good support around you. And if you need to, make sure you reach out to my page and we'll have a chat. So that unfortunately is the destiny that awaits us all in some form or another. That's just the reality. Birth is 100% fatal.
No doubt.
It is.
All we want to do is make a positive impact while we're here, hey?
Well, that's the thing, is to try and actually leave the place in better condition than it was when we arrived.
So my best friend died, about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And I delivered a eulogy at her wedding, and one of the I searched everything at her funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I say?
Eulogies at weddings would be a little bit weird.
That would be weird. Yeah. That would be very weird. And she said, and I remember it so clearly, and it said, at the end of my day, when I meet my maker, I hope that I can say, I used up every bit of talent that you gave me, and I have nothing left.
Yeah.
And that woman lived 1,000 years. In her 53 years of life.
Yeah.
And she was part of a really big driver, Topher, between the breakdown of that first marriage and getting some clarity about who I was as a person, and then meeting Jason was all around my journey of moving to far north Queensland and stripping myself of everything that didn't matter.
Yeah. Simplifying. They're doing a bit of a Marie Kondo.
Like Eat, Pray, Love 20 years before it became a freaking hit. Yeah.
You were doing Eat, Pray, Love before it was cool.
Note also the hair.
Yeah,
Pink, yeah.
Look.
Bitch stole my look. I did this, yeah, before she was fucking on the radar.
I see. I wasn't sure if it was that or The Devil Wears Prada. I wasn't sure which one you were going for there.
No, Devil Wears Prada is so too bitchy for me.
No. But her look, not how she treats people. She's awful.
No,
but
awful.
Yeah, it is a good movie though. My wife makes me watch it from time to time, and I whinge and moan relentlessly the whole time because my masculinity requires me to, but I do actually secretly enjoy it.
Until I walk in halfway through and realize you're watching it without me.
Exposed.
But this is the thing, without wanting to get too heavy, this idea that we all give our lives for something, right? We all know that we're going to die, but in a way, because it's ubiquitous, it happens to all of us. It becomes meaningless in a sense. Like it's terrifying in its own way, but it's just going to happen. It's just whatever. Okay. But it's part
of life.
It is a part of life. But this idea that we all actually give our lives for something. And there are some people who give their life for a job, and that's all they've got to show for it. And their entire life was given for a job. Some people give their lives to their families and to their children and to the next generation. And that's noble. Some people give their lives for a social cause, an environmental cause, these various things. But whether or not you do it intentionally, you have given your life for something. Some people give their life for a well-mowed lawn and a washed car, right? That's not what they planned. It's not what they intended, but it's just how they spent their time, and it's how they spent their life. And in the end, when they died, that's what they actually gave their life for. And so none of us get to choose how we die, when we die, any of that sort of stuff. But actually, if we're willing to take conscious control of it, we can choose what we give our life for. And that, for me, is one of the most challenging kind of things.
And then it doesn't matter when the moment of death is, right, Topher?
It's not that relevant.
Yeah.
It's not that relevant. And I played with the thought experiment for a while that I stopped using because it is a little bit macabre, but I'll resurrect it for the sake of this conversation. What would you be willing to give your life for right this instant? Okay? If you could make a deal with God and say, okay, he's going to take you right now, but in return, this is what's going to happen in the world. This is the difference that it's going to make. He's going to make you a deal for your life. And what would it have to be? How incredible would the things you would demand of God be? Like, you wouldn't just say, I want my kids to be happy. Okay, yeah, you'd start there, right?
Yeah,
and then you'd be like, hang on.
But if you want to make a dent in the world, I would think no judgment. Yeah. And I've probably worked a lifetime on no judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a pretty cool thing if the universe embraced that. If there was no judgment, I think that would be a remarkable thing.
Let me finish the challenge.
No prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I have this again with my teenagers. So I have got a daughter that is like invested in tattooing and body piercing.
Oh, yes.
Okay. It's irrelevant to who she is as a person, yeah?
Yeah.
But she will be judged by that.
Yeah.
I would like to think that there was I would like to think that if the dent that I could make in the universe is to judge people on what they do and their contribution, and not on, as you mentioned before, you mentioned the Sudanese lady, that has been unsuccessful in being able to buy.
Yep.
A world without that sort of judgment would be a nice place. Be amazing.
Yeah, no, that would be a huge step up. So here's the challenge, though, in its fullness. So the question is, what would you be willing to give your life for right now, right this instant? Now, at some point, you're going to die. And in that moment, you will give your life in that instant. Your life will be taken from you right then, right in that instant. Are you actually putting in the work between now and then to achieve any of what you would put on that list?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the answer should hopefully be yes. But there's a lot of people that are living without any intention whatsoever. And, it's like that, the people that win the Miss Universe, whatever. Oh, what would you wish for? Oh, world peace. Okay. Yay. Okay. A lot of people answer the question in that kind of a way. It's very glib and it's very shallow. And it's answered without any recognition that whether they like it or not, whether they know it or not, every single day they are giving a piece of their life to achieve what? And I think a huge amount of personal satisfaction comes from aligning.
I don't know that a lot of people even ask that question, Topher.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's a tough question, and I stopped asking it of people because it freaked a lot of people out. I can be really intense at times. I don't know if you've noticed that. And it freaked a lot of people out. But if we can align what we're actually doing day to day with the things that would be in that deal, if we had to make that bargain with God and we had no choice, right? It's going to happen, but we get to choose what we put into that basket of things that happen as a result, okay? Because the truth is we have no choice. We are going to die. It's going to happen. The only thing we really have any control over is what's in that basket of legacy that we leave behind. What difference do we actually make between now and then? So aligning what we're doing day to day with the things that we would actually demand of God in that moment, if that deal had to be made, I think there's an enormous amount of personal satisfaction, motivation, happiness, joy, focus that actually comes out of that conversation and that process, as scary as it is. So sorry, but I just thought I'd go and get all macabre and serious on you. Queen Me says, scary question. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Andrew says, marry well. It is the most important decision you will ever make.
I would absolutely say that, yeah.
The other piece of advice there, Andrew, is never criticize your wife's decisions. You were one of them.
Love it.
Creagill says, uncomfortable truth. Ask God each day to do my best for him. It's hard doing it alone. Yeah. Death is not the end. It's a part of the journey.
Have some support, hey?
Yeah. Tim says, got me thinking about how I spend my time. Thanks, mate. Yep. It's not a macabre thought process. Hoodie proposed living for your funeral. So Graham Hood is a chap I had on a slow chat, I don't know, a month or so ago. Great guy. Look him up online, Graham Hood.
I would say you ask the question of, do I deserve, a haka and a state funeral? Do I do something that deserves that? I think that should be your question. Like I'm in a dangerous decade. So in the next decade, there is a high probability that I will be diagnosed with something.
Yeah.
So I've got to make an immense amount of difference in this world. Yeah. And I would like to think that I would be deserving of, and I do want it. So just so if anyone's like fucking, does she really want a state funeral with the haka? I fucking do.
You can go back to this slow chat.
And I'm happy to pay whatever price I need to pay today. Yeah. To deserve that, because it makes the world a fucking better place anyway. I deserve the pipe band. I deserve the last post. I may not have fought in a war, but I'm fighting my own personal war.
Yeah, fair enough. Matthew,
you got that? It's documented.
Yeah, it's documented.
If there's no state funeral,
it's on the internet,
Topher,
and the internet is forever.
I'm suing you.
Right? So, okay, all right. You can haunt me. You can haunt me from the grave. Matthew says, for some, this life is hell. Can we skip to this life and all go to heaven? Well, mate, if you need some support, reach out to me through the Facebook page is the best place to do that, mate. Come and have a chat. So Gary's asked this question a few times, and I've skipped over it, but you're persistent, Gary, and I respect that.
Okay, Gary.
So Gary says, Topher, you said people didn't like you. Why? Because
that not obvious enough.
because I speak my mind, and I stand for what I believe to be right. Not that I've always been right, but I stand for what I believe is right, and that automatically puts people offside. You can't. I mean, Winston Churchill turned around. Yes, go again. Winston Churchill turned around and said, so you have enemies. Good. It means you stood for something in this life. Use that first. Knock all that white ash off. Right. Just onto the floor is fine. That's why we have a broom. You cannot stand for anything without instantly having enemies. There are people that genuinely believe the world would be a better place if the government owned everything and controlled everything and we had full Marxism. I think that sounds like hell on earth. And when I say that, I upset the people that believe that that's paradise, right? You cannot stand for something and not have people that don't like you. Now, to be fair, I can also be abrasive. Some of the people that don't like me because of the way that I do things. And maybe, there are certainly lessons I can still learn. There are big lessons I have learned over the last 10 years, but there are more lessons that I can learn about how I say what I say and so forth. And trying to make sure, one of the things that I try to do is to make sure that when people don't like me, they don't like me because of the message, not because of how I delivered it. I try to make sure that people's dislike for me is not based on the fact that I can be an asshole sometimes. I try to minimize it. I try to keep it in check, but I can be, right? All I can do, I can't change the fact that people don't like me. All I can try and do is make sure that the people that don't like me because of what I stand for and because of what I say and believe, not because I was an asshole about it. That's really the only thing I can control.
Characteristics.
Yeah. Yes, more good people should have the balls to break bad laws. 100%. We all love Hoodie. Yes, we do. There you go. There's a link you can watch or not, whatever you like. It's yes, people don't like me because I like kittens. All right, so we've nearly caught up with all the comments. Yeah, so Topher talks real, not MSM. Guys. There you go. Okay. No idea where you are, Topher, but you seem pretty chill and cool. Only stumbled on your channel only through someone sharing it on Facebook. There you go.
How's that?
Well, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, Ness. So hi, thanks for joining us.
Good share it. More people should share it.
Yes, more people should share it. Look, tonight's been a great chat. And we've managed to ply you with enough wine that you're going to be crashing in the
Then I'm crashing here tonight in the garage.
Yeah, crashing. Oh, in the garage. You're going to smoke
in the car.
You're going to smoke cigars while you're here. Excellent. And yes, I noticed this as well, Tech49. My God, is Therese inhaling that cigar? Yes. Like not the whole, but yes. It's astonishing. That's what a lifetime of smoking will do for you. You can inhale cigars. I can't do it. I turn green. I collapse on the floor in coughing fits. All right, so Ross is asking, when will the mandates be over? It's going to be a little while. We're not there yet. But New South Wales opening up is putting a lot of pressure on. And I said in October that October was going to be the peak of the lockdowns, right? And so far it has been. We don't know what's going to happen this coming winter. Will some level of lockdowns be reintroduced? Yes, but I'm still of the view very firmly we will never get back to the level of lockdown. I don't reckon we will either.
That's my gut.
I just don't think it's politically feasible. I'm not yet ready to call the peak of the mandates. But I think there is only a matter of time before the Omicron variant is shown to be so comparatively harmless.
Yeah, I reckon too.
And dominant, because it's more contagious than any of the other variants, but it is actually less harmful. On current evidence, it is less harmful than an ordinary common cold. It's actually safer to get the Omicron variant of the coronavirus than to catch the common cold on the current death rates. 2 days ago, the UK announced the first Omicron fatality. Now, you think about how far it has spread around the world and how many people have had it. It took until 2 days ago for someone to actually die from it, right? And that's tragic, obviously, for that person's family. Well, it's been declared as being from it. However, we all know how that can go as well. So I think it is only a matter of time before the mandates are going to have to end. They're not sustainable politically, and we have an election coming up in March, April, May federally, and an election coming up in November next year. The Labor Party is already beginning to eat itself, and 12 months out from an election, that's never a good sign. I think that mandates will end in this coming year. I think it's odds
2021 or in the next 12 months?
No, in 2022.
Yeah.
And I would be, if I had to put money one way or the other, I would guess that mandates will end in the first half of next year. It'll be before the middle of winter next year.
Wanted to know about how we got to this point. Would they perhaps have a documentary?
Okay, my wife wants me to plug the documentary. Okay, so Battleground Melbourne. Go to battlegroundmelbourne.com, put your email address in there, and you'll be kept up to date as we approach our launch date very early in the new year. It's coming together really well. It's looking amazing. It's sounding incredible. It is going to be very, very powerful. The only thing wrong at this point in time is that everything's taking a little bit longer than I'd hoped. So in the big scheme of things, I would rather delay the launch a little bit and have a kick-ass documentary that tells the world all about what's happened in Melbourne and tells the truth of our version of events, what we saw from the ground, the people that were in the protests, rather than rush it out to try and meet a deadline and not have an absolutely top-notch product. So we're looking at a launch very early in January of next year, but go to battlegroundmelbourne.com, put your email address in, and you'll be kept fully up to date with all what's happening there. Is there anything else I've missed, babe?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. My producer wife is now telling me that I've covered everything.
It's done.
Therese, thank you.
Thank
You've been a
you.
pleasure to talk to. You've been a pleasure to talk to today, and very relaxing. It's kind of nice actually having a slow chat that isn't all about the politics and all that crap. It's nice. I've enjoyed it.
I have enjoyed it too.
So
I'm crashing here tonight.
Well, thank you for watching. And we hope you've enjoyed it. You've stayed to the end. So I trust you got some value out of tonight. And I look forward to seeing you for future slow chats, for future videos, and of course, for the Battleground Melbourne documentary, battlegroundmelbourne.com. Go there, make sure you've signed up, and you'll be kept up to date.